Donald Trump from a year ago, so that's one thing to watch. Can Glenn Younkin, is he capable of outperforming Donald Trump in some of these rural counties and pretty much run up the score, if you will, so that when some Democratic strongholds for Terry McAuliffe, City of Richmond, Fairfax County report, that he's able to overcome. It looks close. It is close. Fascinating election indeed, guys.
Close election. Thank you so much, Joe. So we'll be watching those rural areas and see what happens there. We're going to go to our Jake Burns now. He's in Northern Virginia.
That's right. He's been covering the Younkin campaign, and he's now with their watch party tonight. What are they telling you tonight, Jake? What are they feeling?
A lot of optimism, Bill, that is for sure, from the Younkin campaign. Joe mentioned that polling that's been done. It's shown the race has been tightening over the course of the past couple of months. Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, a major lead back during the summertime. But as we've approached the beginning or the end of this election cycle, Glenn Younkin has done very, very well. His campaign really focusing their messaging around really two things. One, education, specifically County Beach. School curricula. Of course, the Democrats say a lot of that is actually misplaced and doesn't actually happen in K-12 schools, but it seems to have touched a chord with at least some voters. The question is if it's touched a chord with enough suburban voters to give Glenn Younkin a victory here tonight. We know the trends in Virginia have been trending blue over the past 12 years or so. That was 2009, the last time a Republican won statewide. Younkin seems to be, according to the Virginia GOP, the kind of candidate they really feel could reverse that trend. It's not just because of his personal wealth, estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars after working at the Carlyle Group, a global investment firm. It's also how he comes off. He's the type of candidate that seems down to earth despite the fact that he has such immense personal wealth. And he's used that to his advantage out on the campaign trail throughout Southwest Virginia, Richmond, Tidewater, and Northern Virginia, the entire state, trying to really relate to voters. And that's why when we talked to him earlier today, he really felt like they were going to do well in some specific areas. He thought Richmond would be one of them, specifically the suburbs, Chesterfield County being one. But listen to this soundbite right here. He really makes a point to mention Virginia Beach, where he was raised, where he went to high school, where he has his roots. So listen in.
I expect us to do very strongly in the Valley and Southwest Virginia. I expect us to do strongly in Hampton Roads. And I think we're going to make a big statement in Virginia Beach that hasn't been made for a while. And you just watch what happens in Northern Virginia.
Glenn Younkin lives here in Northern Virginia. That's why he feels that he's going to do so well up here, and also the messaging that's been done around Loudoun County and the issues there. Of course, we're checking in to see who will show up tonight. So far, looking like the pretty typical election night party. A couple people coming in, grabbing a glass of wine. I saw an old-fashioned that looked pretty nice earlier. Just looking for some few dignitaries around the Richmond area. The only person I've really noticed, State Delegate John McGuire, up for re-election in the 56th House District near Goochland. We'll see what happens in his race, and we'll check back in here in about 30 minutes with any updates we have from the campaign. Again, feeling optimistic, giving all the enthusiasm and momentum that seem to be going their way up in the final weeks of this campaign. For now, working for you in Chantilly, Jake Burns, CBS 6 News.
All right, thank you very much, Jake. Both of the campaigns in Northern Virginia today, both of them have been claiming to be picking up momentum in these last few days, too. So
that is right. Let's check in now with our Cam Thompson. He's up there now with the Younkin campaign. Cam?
McAuliffe.
With the McAuliffe campaign, I'm sorry.
Well, Bill, actually, I was going to say I am with the McAuliffe campaign here, but similar to what we just heard Jake talk about with the enthusiasm with the Younkin campaign and feeling confident with these election results now coming in. Very similar here at the Hotel Ballroom in McLean, Virginia, Northern Virginia as well, with people here with the Terry McAuliffe campaign and the rest of the Democratic ticket. There's several dozen, I'd say maybe 100, 200 people now, both in sort of the area where they actually have all of us set up here with the media. A few people are sort of gathering behind me in front of the stage, but a lot of people off camera in the hotel lobby gathering, people starting to check in. I have seen several dignitaries with the Democratic Party. There's Mayor LeVar Stoney. Senator Mark Warner just walked past me as you were about to come with me. And then, of course, House Speaker Eileen Fillercorn, who has a lot riding on tonight, as along with the big three races. We do have all 100 seats up in the House of Delegates and trying to see if Democrats can maintain control. And, of course, talking with the people here, they are feeling good. Talking with the staffers from the McAuliffe campaign, they were encouraged by the voter turnout, the high numbers that they were hearing from the ground in some of their big areas, such as Fairfax County, Prince William County, here in Northern Virginia, and then mentioning down as well in the city of Richmond, and a lot of African-American turnout, which they see will be a good base for them in order to maintain the governor's mansion, the lieutenant governorship, and the attorney general as well. And I got a chance to speak to Terry McAuliffe earlier today, again running for a second term as governor after his first run in 2014 to 18, and he said that he feels good with the number of early votes that we got, and we're waiting to see when those are starting to be reported, because the State Board of Elections said after what happened last year with all of those mail-in ballots getting reported very late in the evening, they were supposed to start pre-processing those ballots and hopefully lead to an earlier return and give sort of a better idea. Over 1.1 million people voted early, and that's around roughly 20% of registered voters in Virginia. McAuliffe feeling that will go very well for him and the Democratic ticket. Now, as the results were starting to come in, of course, very preliminarily here, I did get a chance to speak to State Senator Jennifer McClellan from the Richmond area about how she is feeling about the chances to maintain control of not only the House, but the big three.
You know, people are very excited about the progress that Democrats have made since we've been in the majority, and they want to keep it. Access to voting, health care, investments in education, all of that, they want to keep making progress.
And of course, we have a lot of other people here with the Democratic Party we're going to try to talk to tonight as we continue to see the results come in, including Mayor LeVar Stoney, not only for what's going on with the elections at the state capitol, but, as we were waiting to see the results for the Richmond casino and see how those are coming in and how he is feeling. So right now, working for you live in Northern Virginia, Kevin Thompson, CBS 6 News.
Thanks, Cam. Well, joining us now to break down the races and what we can expect tonight is CBS 6 political analyst Dr. Bob Holsworth.
And Bob, it seems like an eternity. It is 7:39, and usually we have an avalanche of numbers already. I'm seeing some from Chesterfield and about, it looks like 12% overall statewide. What are you seeing and what are you watching?
Well, I'm watching a couple of things right now. First of all, Chesterfield is pretty interesting, but we think that is the in-person vote and not the mail vote. Right now, Glenn Younkin has a lead. He certainly is going to want to extend that lead by the time that early vote comes in if he's going to be competitive tonight. We've seen some early vote, however, come in from Arlington County and Fairfax County, and they look pretty good for Terry McAuliffe right now. We're going to have to see what happens there with the in-person vote. So by and large, that's what we're looking at right now. Chesterfield County reporting the in-person vote. Glenn Younkin with a handy lead, but I think he would like that lead to extend to 10 or 12 points rather than 7 or 8, as it seems to be right now.
Dr. Bob, of course, the entire nation is watching Virginia tonight. We have been discussing Chesterfield and how a lot of eyes are on that county as well. Can you explain to our viewers what the voters decide in that area is so important?
Well, typically we've looked at Chesterfield because they report their votes so early and because it gives us a signal of what is happening statewide. Chesterfield's sort of a purple county that leans typically a little bit to the Republican side. So if Terry McAuliffe gets blown out in Chesterfield, that's not a good sign. But if he's close, he doesn't have to win. But if he loses by 5,000, 4,000 votes, that's probably a good sign. Let me also say that Henrico and Richmond are also extremely important. Henrico's been a steadily blue county for a long time. It gives the Democrats a big margin. We have to see that. And a lot of people are looking at the turnout in Richmond, because if the turnout in Richmond is strong, Terry McAuliffe expects to pick up a ton of votes here.
Speaking of the turnout, we talked a bit, and you said that gubernatorial or races like this don't usually get a high turnout. We're seeing it different this year, though. What's the cause for that?
Well, I think what's happened in Virginia are a couple of things. First, because it's a very close race and there's been a ton of money spent on it, voters know that there's an election. Secondly, beyond that, Virginia now has all this early voting. We never had that. You had to have an excuse to vote absentee. Now a lot of people had the opportunity to vote earlier, and that's generated turnout as well. So essentially what we think is going to happen now, we think we're going to go over 50% of registered voters in the governor's race. Last time it was 48%, and the presidential race was about 74%. So less than the presidential race, but a lot more than we've seen in recent gubernatorial races.
And it also seems like we're really going to have to drill down into the numbers when we get them to know, wait, is that a locality that is releasing the early numbers early, or is this just the in-person? Oh, wait, let's check the precincts now. So in a way, we're going to have to keep sifting through them to figure out what we're really looking at.
I always think we're juggling on election night one way or another, and we're certainly going to be looking at that and really trying to get all the information that we can from a variety of sources so that we can make good judgments ourselves, Bill and Candace.
We have some of those numbers now scrolling across our screen. Of course, these are the early numbers, and as we just said, we think some of them are early votes that are being released by the various localities, but again, we'll only know as the evening goes on. In the meantime, as you heard us discussing, Chesterfield is one of the counties that could decide this race.
Our Brendan King spoke with voters there today, and he joins us live with an update.
Right now, Bill and Candace, the last remaining poll workers are inside Crenshaw Elementary School tabulating these results. And you may remember the significance of Chesterfield County. Back in 2017, Chesterfield went blue for the first time since 1961. And if you fast forward about 4 years or so, once again, the political pundits say this is the county to watch. So take a look at this. I heard from the county registrar earlier today, and I learned by 2 p.m. today, voter turnout for the entire county had already exceeded the total number of people who voted in the 2017 election. That's when Ralph Northam, the Democrat, narrowly beat Republican Ed Gillespie by 700 votes in this county. And as you just heard from our CBS 6 political analyst, Dr. Bob Holdsworth, he told me earlier today he does predict this will all come out to turnout, that Younkin is a favorite to win, but the big question tonight is by how much. Like you mentioned, I also spoke to several voters today. One man told me he wanted to make sure he voted today and encouraged his family and friends to do so. Listen to what other voters say brought them out to the polls.
Having a say in my children's education. Taxes are high right now. Inflation, of course, is through the roof.
You know, as a same-sex couple, we just earned our right to be a couple. And so continuing to keep those values around for us and our family is extremely important.
And I just wanted to refresh the results here in Chesterfield as I'm standing in Chesterfield with 61 of 81 precincts complete. Glenn Younkin, the Republican, is leading the Democrat 54.41%, Terry McAuliffe 44.49%. So much quieter in the suburbs as we enter the 8 o'clock hour. Earlier today, the energy was robust for both teams, and it's the voters who say they won out this time. They believe the candidates were speaking to the suburban voters, the middle-class voters, those who work and live in this county. The voters tell me that they believe that their vote today was heard on this election day. Working for you in Chesterfield, I'm Brendan King, CBS 6 News.
All right, thanks, Brendan. As we said, there is a third choice on the ballot this year in the gubernatorial race.
Princess Blanding is the candidate for the recently formed Liberation Party. Blanding decided to become active in politics after the death of her brother, Marcus David Peters. He was shot by a Richmond police officer in the midst of a violent mental health crisis he was suffering in 2018. Prosecutors twice reviewed the case and found the shooting justified. But Blanding's advocacy helped get a bill named after her brother passed into law. It calls for behavioral health experts to respond to crisis calls instead of just police. But Blanding says frustrations with the version of the bill that was ultimately signed inspired her to run. And she says her party speaks to voters who feel left out by the two major parties.
They feel that nobody's listening and nobody cares. And so it is definitely a breath of fresh air when they see that there is a candidate that is fighting for all of us, for all working class, for all marginalized community members, for all of the oppressed people.
And you can learn more about Princess Blanding's campaign at WTVR.com.
We have panelists joining us tonight to talk about the election and the issues that matter to you.
And so we want to welcome Gary Flowers, radio host of the Gary Flowers Show, and former aide to former Governor Doug Wilder, and Reverend Jesse Jackson, and the CEO of the Black Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. And John Reid, a native Richmonder who worked in President Reagan's press office in California and was a communications director for former U.S. Senator George Allen. He is now the morning host of WRVA News Radio. Welcome to you both tonight.
Thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
Let's start with you. What are you feeling about this election so far? We hear so much about momentum swings and the issues. What are you attuned to right now?
Once again, we are sitting here in the Commonwealth of Virginia playing a pivotal role in national politics. This time a gubernatorial race. What's going to be interesting tonight is that most races for governor are decided by the president and the White House. This might be decided by the track record of state legislators who've made progress in the Democratic Party. Or it may be a repudiation of the president's lack of perceived delivery of public policy issues.
Right, so many different factors at play, and of course we'll be parsing the exit polls that we get from the various voters. John, how about you? Do you have a gut sense on this, on what we're waiting to happen tonight?
I've been saying for the last year that I think perhaps Democrats in the legislature have overreached. They're very exuberant. They have won in places like my home county of Henrico County, which used to be solidly Republican. They did take back seat after seat after seat over the last several years. And then when they got complete control of the House of Delegates, the Senate, and the apparatus of state government with the governor's office, they rushed to push through legislation, which I think may have struck some voters as a little too much, too quickly. And the end results have been problematic. Like Loudoun, I think a lot of parents have looked at the Loudoun County situation, which started with a trans bathroom issue and ended with a story that was highly predictable about a young woman allegedly being raped, and then a cover-up to it, and another woman being raped. And I think a lot of people said, "Now, wait a minute, there's a little too much that's happened here. Maybe we should tamp this down." I'm watching some of these House seats, which we may get results back from faster than the statewide numbers. The seat that Kirk Cox, the longtime Republican delegate who was the Speaker of the House of Delegates, he's in the bluest district that a Republican holds in the state. Mm-hmm. If Mike Cherry, who is seeking to be the Republican to take that seat and continue Republican dominance, if he wins, then it may be a good sign for Republicans. If he loses, though, then my assessment is all wrong, and the people of Virginia have decided, we're happy with the progressive movement in the state, I think.
There's also a legacy.
But let me do this. Let me see your word dominance as attributed to the Democratic Party and overreach and work backward. Politics is a contact sport. It's full of bumps and grinds. The Republican Party has had a vast record, nationally and in state politics, of dominance. But yet, when the Democrats get power and push through progressive legislation as they had the votes to do so, then it's an overreach. So it's really a double standard.
Well, it's an overreach in my opinion, and the question is, will the voters say, we agree it's an overreach, or, this is what we wanted? I think voters said that they were rejecting President Trump, I think. And I was a Trump supporter, but I think they were rejecting President Trump in Central Virginia of late. Did the end result with some of the legislation that Democrats pushed through with the votes, legitimately, they had the votes to do it, did the average voter in Central Virginia say, this is a little too much for me?
Well, I guess it's a broader question, though.
The victors get to write the history and get to determine what it is, of course. So you're obviously entitled. If the Democrats' agenda does take a beating tonight, then obviously it would seem like an overreach.
In a two-party winner-take-all system, there's going to be an ebb and flow. The question, I think, on the floor tonight is the legislation that was passed by Democrats. Is it meaningful to Virginians? And if it's meaningful to Virginians, then I don't see how it could be construed as an overreach. It made the lives of Virginians better. True?
No, I don't think so.
Well, but if it angered people at a school board meeting in Loudoun County, obviously it didn't please everybody.
That's one county.
So, no, that is true. But then again, tonight, as I think to John's point, that the results may reflect other folks saying, yeah, you know what? That's right.
We shall see.
Yeah. So the polls right now are showing a very tight race, and that's all we can go on at this point. Did you both think that this race would be this tight, and what do you think is going to be the determining factor that gets your candidate the win?
I did not think it would be this close. I thought the gravitas of a sitting president with meaningful, from the top down, meaningful legislation by Democrats in the Commonwealth from the bottom up would have a gubernatorial candidate representing the Democratic Party farther ahead. We're not seeing that.
Yeah, I thought it would be tight. The last year, it has been my sense that there has been an overreach and that people might not react well to it. And the last few months, a number of problems have kind of revealed themselves. And I don't think they're contrived. I don't think they're just political issues. I think they're real issues that the average person has looked at and said, I want to reevaluate this. So the fact that it's tight is important. I would have encouraged, who am I to tell Glenn Younkin what to do as a communications director for a guy who lost by less than 3,000 votes out of millions cast, but having seen this kind of tight race before, I would have advocated that Glenn Younkin be a little more combative, but you know what? The guy comes across as very calm and rational. Some people aren't going to agree with what he has to say, but he comes across as very calm and rational, and that may have been the magic thing that gave some of these suburban voters who had previously rejected Donald Trump and Republicans the piece to say, you know what, let's take a look at this guy, when they might have rejected him 2 years ago out of hand just because he had an R behind his name.
Well, and what about this notion? Many people accepted that Virginia had become blue. We saw the blue wave. You just said much of it might have been animus at the occupant of the White House when Donald Trump was president that brought out the Democrats and the angry suburban voters. Is Virginia trending blue, or are we basically a 50-50 state, just like these polls would have us believe?
Before I answer that question, I'm going to go back to the word combative. I believe that the Republican Party, beginning with Newt Gingrich in 1994, ushered in a new form of political engagement.
Contract with America.
Contract on America, as we called it in the black community. And it was combative. It was we versus them. Arthur Brooks, formerly of the American Enterprise Institute, I never thought I'd be quoting anyone from the American Enterprise Institute, has written a book entitled Love Your Enemies. And what he talks about is the contrast between the spirit of contempt that is stirred by candidates such as the loser of the last election, and then the spirit of love. And I think that when Younkin is described as not combative enough, I think he's just a decent guy who's running for office. And isn't it time that we bring decency back into politics and not the combative we versus they, we have to take them out, we can't go out to dinner with them, we must destroy them. That's not sensible.
John, what do you say to that?
Well, I agree with you. And I wish Democrats had held up their end of the bargain the last 4 years. I think it's been pretty combative. But as it relates to Virginia,
as a response to the loser of the last election,
I saw it a pretty bad, rough time across the country for 4 years. And I used to go. I lived in D.C. when I was working up on the Hill, and I'd go to things in Washington, and President Obama was there, or some of his top aides were there, and I wasn't a fan. But I stood for the President of the United States, even though I didn't vote for him, and I applauded appropriately. I wasn't enthusiastic about it.
Never would have thought. The fact that you have to say that you may not have done that is shocking.
Well, it's a response to the way Democrats responded for the last 4 years. They made it impossible for Republicans to engage in the program. But to your point about whether Virginia is blue, look, the demographics of this state have changed. The population centers have changed. There are more people in Northern Virginia, and many of them are transplants, and I welcome people to. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea that I'm saying to all our New York friends who moved to Virginia, I don't like them, but there are a lot of folks who've migrated.
You use the trans word.
For transplants, yeah. But most people moving from northern states to Northern Virginia, I think, have been raised with a different mindset than a lot of native Virginians have. That's changed the political outlook here in Virginia, and you begin to see that they have I don't want to use the word dependence, but they're much more open-minded about government programs. Many of them work for contractors and those who do business with the government in Northern Virginia. That's a real practical issue for conservatives who often try to rein in government. And that has also shown some impact in Central Virginia, some of the urban areas here in Central Virginia as well.
I take issue with reigning in government as though government is bad. Every traffic light through which we travel is government. Every letter that we receive by the post office is government. To reign in government suggests that government has gone willy-nilly amok. And that's not true. But no, on contrary, it is delivering services, and but for the Republican Party's recalcitrance and obstructionist tactics, there would be more deliverables to the American people. Do you think people in Abingdon or in rural Virginia wanted their hospitals closed? No. Well, services are lost.
Before we get a little abstract here, Terry McAuliffe is running for a second term. When he left 4 years ago, he was fairly popular, considered fairly successful. Has that dynamic changed? John, let's start with you. Was he wrong to believe that he was successful?
I was surprised that he wanted to come back to be governor for a second time. You know, the ultimate decision about whether or not he was a successful governor is he had a Democrat follow him. That's how you often judge whether you were successful, was did somebody in your own party get to succeed you? I get the impression from the political chattering class that Terry McAuliffe thinks that he may be in line to seek the Democrat nomination for President of the United States. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if that's in the back of his mind, but that would be one reason to seek your old job again. Now, who am I to say this with you sitting here at the table, but I think there's some people who are really mad that Terry McAuliffe stepped on the dreams of African-American women who had worked very hard to serve in the legislature for their opportunity to run for statewide office. Maybe you won't see it as stepped on, but I've got some friends who still speak to me who are Democrats who say, you know, I'm mad about that. I don't think that this guy who already was governor should have treated these black women who worked very hard to win a seat in the General Assembly and earn their seat at the table for him to have pushed them aside. I mean, he won, and I don't think you can say it's unfair, but it was pretty bold of him to do that. And I get the impression that that hasn't sat very well with Democrats.
Interesting use of words when you say stepped on in the same sentence with African-American women. I'm sure black women who are viewing tonight don't appreciate that. But there's a big elephant in the room.
Well, I didn't do it. He did it. So blame him.
He's
the one that did it.
You used the phrase stepped on.
That's the perception I have.
Okay, well, I'm
standing up for them against a white guy. So
and I'm saying
give me some credit.
black women probably are
give me some credit because I'm standing up for them.
I'm only holding you account to your words.
I am fine with the words.
That said, there's a big elephant in the room. There was a qualified African-American lieutenant governor by the name of Justin Fairfax, who won a record 1.3 million votes, the largest number for his office, who without, in my estimation, a political cabal smear campaign, would have been running for his second term, in effect, from February 1st of 2019 to now, and then running again for office. The Democrats had a chance to have a 7-year governor. And so we can't talk about a state delegate or a state senator, however nice they are and however qualified they are. There's never been a governor coming from the House of Delegates straight. There's never been a governor coming from the state Senate straightly. And so therefore, the question becomes, what happened to Justin Fairfax? I think it was a political smear.
You mean that if Governor Northam had stepped down and resigned after the blackface scandal, that Fairfax would have fulfilled the rest of his term and then been able to run for
Absolutely. And would have been more formidable against a Younkin.
I see.
Will it surprise you that I agree with you? I think it was a total political smear. And I think Justin Fairfax is one person who has been shockingly quiet, and he has every right to be angry. He earned the position of lieutenant governor. He was shafted, and I am surprised that he has held his tongue as he has. It shows a political discipline on his part.
Because he's a Virginia gentleman.
Well, I'll give him credit, because I would be if that had happened to me, I would be berserk. And I do think a lot of people in the Democrat Party owe him.
When you say
hold on, let's start with the Republican Party.
Let's get the terms right.
Well, Republicans didn't.
John, is it Democrat Party or Democratic Party?
Well, you know, You correct me, because I go back and forth with this. I've had Susan Swecker on the show. She gives me...
Democratic is an adjective.
Okay, well...
Maybe I'm wrong.
I want to get it right. So
okay.
How should I say this? Democratic?
Follow his lead.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to get the terms clear.
All right. It is not meant to be an insult. But to the Justin Fairfax question, what are you saying about Republicans with Justin Fairfax? Because I think this is... I think this is all internal Democrat politics.
No.
What am I missing?
Well, by my recollection, Republican Party was behind the release from the beginning. And then the Democrats, I believe, joined in.
Can we table this conversation for a
I
moment?
think we got a little far afield. We're supposed to keep up with the results, and right now we're hearing that 888 precincts are reporting. That's about a third of the 2,855. And right now, and these are the early numbers, and Bob, you'll be able to parse those a little in a moment. 58% for Younkin, 41% for McAuliffe. Again, that is 888 precincts. Which ones they are in which counties, and whether they're early or not. So, gentlemen, we're going to get back to you shortly.
Right now, though, we want to go to the State Board of Elections. They're holding a news conference right now to give an update on the election and any possible issues. Let's listen in right now.
In Appomattox County. In Floyd County, precincts 101, 201, 401, and 501. Those ballots that were added to those precincts are machine readable, and they never ran out. In Powhatan, precincts 101, 102, 301, 302, 401, 402, 501, 502, and 503. Those ballots need to be hand counted, but voting continued unabated. In Madison County, all precincts except for Grace Mill and the ballots that were added to those localities are machine readable. In Albemarle County, precincts 201, 301, 302, 305, 405, 406, 506, 601, 604, and 606. Those ballots will need to be hand counted in those precincts. And then finally, in Chesterfield, several precincts were supplemented with additional ballots, all machine readable, although some may need to be hand counted as a result of lighter ink than the machine would accept, but most should be machine readable. 2 precincts did run out of ballots. However, officers were instructed and had voters cast ballots using the express vote, which produces a machine readable ballot. And I want to reiterate that any hand counting that needs to be done, this guidance has been provided to the localities in advance of the election, and all of the officers have been trained on how to hand count those ballots. I do not have estimates on ballot numbers, how many were cast in these precincts that need to be hand counted. However, all of that information will be made available through the canvass process and the finalization and certification of the votes. There was also reports earlier today regarding mask requirements. Our policy had never changed. It's been in effect since last year during the pandemics, or during the general 2020 election. We got reports, unconfirmed reports, that voters had either been turned away or had been asked to wait. We felt there was enough in those reports that we should remind the localities of the mask guidance, which is that no voter can be turned away if they're not wearing a mask. Again, we reissued that same guidance that's been in effect for over a year and also posted to our social media accounts. Those were the major issues that we dealt with today, but again, these are minor things that we worked with the localities to address, and they did very well. Again, as you see, votes, the results are coming in through our election night reporting website. I cannot reiterate this enough. Election night results are unofficial, and what you're seeing there are the unofficial results. I'll talk about the canvass process in a second, but I want to reiterate how they are unofficial. So Virginia counts every single vote that is cast, and we will count and make sure that every vote is counted. Absentee mail-in ballots that are postmarked today or before, or earlier, sorry, and that arrive in the registrar's office prior to noon on Friday are counted. So we will see additional numbers come in over the next few days. For reference, 10,901 ballots came in between Wednesday and Friday at noon during last year's election. So 10,901 during 2020. So beginning tomorrow, local election officials will begin the canvass process. This is an open and public meeting where electoral boards who represent both parties review precinct results and check, recheck, and then check again the results for accuracy. Virginia law requires that any changes made to unofficial election night results are entered into a change log, and a reason must be provided for why that number changed. So beginning after midnight tonight, any changes to the election night results page will be documented in the change log. Very important to note that this change log is available on our website. The entire process is incredibly transparent. Again, the canvass meeting is done in a public meeting with representatives from both parties. The localities have until Tuesday, November 9th, at the close of business, to certify their results and send them to the Department of Elections. The Department of Elections at that point will check, recheck, and check again to ensure that the results are accurate and require the localities to recertify their results if any discrepancies are discovered. And then on Monday, November 15th, the State Board of Elections will meet to certify the statewide results as well as the House of Delegates results. I know there's a lot of questions about the recount process in Virginia, so I'm going to go over that very quickly in case we are in a position where a recount may be possible. So first of all, in Virginia, there is no such thing as an automatic recount. The process begins once the results are certified. After that, the losing candidate must have been defeated within 1% of the winning candidate. So the margin must be between 0 and 1%. If the margin of victory is between 0.5% and 1%, the losing candidate can request a recount, but the losing candidate would be responsible for paying for the recount. If the margin of victory is between 0 and 0.5%, the losing candidate can request a recount, but then the state pays for the recount. The candidate has 10 days, the losing candidate has 10 days to request a recount from the certification. Has 10 days from the certification to request a recount. It must be done through a petition through the appropriate court. Since the State Board of Elections meeting is on November 15th to certify the election, 10 days falls on Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, the courts are closed, so the deadline this year to file a petition would be November 29th. We have a very comprehensive step-by-step recount instruction manual on our website. I encourage everybody to take a look at it. It's broken into instructions and information for public, the media, as well as the different participants through the recount, and it gives a very thorough overview of our recount process. Again, in closing, I couldn't be prouder to stand with the election officials of Virginia tonight. We've been working for months to prepare for this election, and we are proud of the work we have done. I want to thank the staff at the Department of Elections. I want to thank the State Board of Elections. Mostly, I would like to thank our registrars who work hard every day to administer our elections at the local level. I want to thank the thousands and thousands of election officers who served in the precincts today and over the last 45 days to assist voters throughout the Commonwealth. And I just want to make sure that I also thank the law enforcement partners, our emergency management partners at the federal, state, and local level who work with us to ensure a safe and secure election every single election, whether 1% of voters turn out or 100% of voters turn out. This is a major operation, and I am proud to stand with them in this process. So with that, I thank you all. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, we're going to break away. You're getting an update from the State Board of Elections with Christopher Piper, the director there. We're going to take a look now at some of the latest results. And again, the numbers are still coming in the big races in our area. As you can see now with...
Okay, so the question was, what do we...
You can still hear actually Mr. Piper in the background. Glenn Younkin leading with 56%. Terry McAuliffe pulling in 44%. Princess Blanding pulling in just under 1% perhaps. That's with 47% of the precincts, about halfway through.
All right, let's look at the lieutenant governor's race. Winsome Sears ahead right now, 56% of the vote. Hala Ayala with 44%. This is 47% of the votes or the reporting right now.
And Attorney General, 46% of the precincts in. Jason Yaris leading 55 to 45 right now. Just about 136,000 votes separating the two of them. 46% of the precincts in so far. And of course, right now, in one of the hotly contested districts, the 73rd, with 62% in. Mary Castleberg challenging Rodney Willett, the Democratic incumbent, 52 to 48. Castleberg ahead by about 800 votes or so, with 62% in so far.
We're going to go and talk to former Governor Doug Wilder now. He's with us, and we know, is watching this race, the race for governor, very closely, and he has a lot of insight.
Governor, what are you looking at so far as the numbers are coming in? What's your gut telling you?
Well, my gut is telling me that it's a turnout election, as I always said, and the people who were committed to the candidate, if they turn out, they'll win. It's early. As you know, and you've been doing this for a while, Bill, but I would not call a winner. I've seen some people say as far as the House of Delegates races are concerned, it's a big night for the GOP. But I would say stay tuned. And one of the more interesting things is what the candidates themselves bring. And I have been surprised, quite frankly, to see the Republican candidate for governor, Glenn Younkin, do as well as he's done. This man has never held an office before, no kind of office, and it is surprising to me.
Mr. Wilder, what do you think the biggest factor is that's helping Younkin in this race?
The biggest factor?
The factor. What do you think is helping him with no previous history in politics? What do you think it is that's giving him the edge?
Well, you know, when the candidates who run for statewide office have called me, and I tell them the first and number one issue is education. And I think in Mr. Younkin's case, that is clearly the instance as it relates to education. I think parents are concerned about it. The pandemic, as you know, has affected education, it's affected health, it's affected employment. And if you don't have an education, you're not going to be employed. You're not going to get gainful employment. So that one single issue to me is and will be the driving force.
What do you think about the campaign that Terry McAuliffe ran? You're a Democrat. Did he reach out to you along the way for help, for politicking alongside him?
No, he didn't, and I don't blame him for that. I don't fault him for that. You call who you want to help you, and he did call me after he announced that he was running and said that he was going to catch up with me. And that's the last I heard from him. I'm not angry about it. I'm not upset about it. And maybe he didn't need my help.
You mentioned education as far as being one of the themes perhaps that the Younkin campaign has seized upon. What's the biggest issue in your mind facing Virginia voters right now?
I think the question of absolute responsibility to the people, accessibility. They want to believe that their elected officials represent them, that they can speak to them, that they can talk to them, and that they want to be certain that they address the COVID. They want to be able to see again the opening of the schools. They want to see commitment to the schools. And the commitment to the schools, that means all of Virginia's schools, not just a few. That commitment likewise extends to higher education. Historical Black colleges and universities have been neglected in Virginia for forever. And I say that without apology. I went to Virginia Union and had to go to Howard University Law School in Washington, D.C. And that burden in terms of who is looking out for these schools who take others that could not and may not be admitted to other schools. Education is there. And to the extent that the other thing that I've always mentioned to be the one-word definition of politics is money. And who spends it? Who authorizes it? Where is it being spent? When you look at what was given to the state of Virginia in terms of the congressional acts, $4.3 billion, and not a penny of that going to historical Black colleges and universities. That's not right. There's something wrong there. And so the candidates that have seen it and recognize it strike chords, and it's not a Black or white issue. You look at the people who are white that go to historical Black colleges and universities right here in Virginia. And yet they have almost forgotten. And that has to end because you need services, you need jobs, you need opportunities. And then it shows a commitment to making certain that race has nothing to do with the qualifications of the individual, as well as the dispensation of funds and money. Money is still the power broker, and to the extent of who controls it. I've always said, rather than to be concerned about a fast slice of the pie, many people have wanted to have their hands on the knife that cuts the pie. And that way you might be more sure of getting an education. The night is young. And yet, if you look back in Virginia, and I know Virginia pretty well, I've lived here all my life, no Democrat is going to get elected unless there's strong African-American, Black support. And what is there to show the candidates who are running feel that and show that and give evidence of that with their actions when they've had opportunities to sort of do. So I think we'll see that issue still being around. The real question is who wants to resolve it, who wants to solve it.
Leading up to Election Day, the headlines all said, we're all talking about how close this race was going to be. The polls were saying that. So 2 questions for you. Did you expect this race to be this close? And then 2, what do you think that the closeness that the polls are suggesting says about the Commonwealth, the state of the Commonwealth?
Well, I thought it would be close. As I called it, a turnout election, who gets his people out. We do polling, as you know, at Virginia Commonwealth University, and we were the first poll out to show how close it would be. And people said, oh, it's not going to be that close. I do think it's close. And I think one of the determinant factors is, are the people close enough to those who are running for office to believe that it makes a difference, that they make a difference, that the candidates see them, rather than to be concerned with who is calling the shots. Are you responsible to the people? Do people feel they can call you and get a response? Look at what's happening with the Virginia Employment Agency. People can't get calls returned. Look what's happening when they try to get funding on testing, and somebody's in charge of that, responsible for that. I think Virginians are very independent people. They are not going to be concerned with who comes in to tell them who to vote for. They want to know. And I used to, when I was running for office, I remember once going into a place in one of the counties, and people were in front of the party with me saying, okay, we want you to vote for Doug Wilder. And they kept saying it and passing out literature. And a old lady, she said, would you mind getting out of the way? I want to talk to him. What are you going to do? What have you done? And when did you do it? And how does that affect me? And I've never forgotten that. And I think candidates too often forget that they represent the people. And the people are always in charge because they are always ahead of the leaders. You listen to them, they'll tell you what the real issues are. Not the pundits, not the advisors. Listen to the people.
Governor, one of our guests here in the studio, John Reid with WRVA, brought up a good point. Have Democrats perhaps overreached then, losing track of the people, as you say, that they're supposed to be serving?
Well, I don't know that they've overreached, but all you have to do is look at the record and to see when did they reach. When can you show, for instance, when I cite the $4.3 billion, if not a penny of that was made available for historical Black colleges and universities? Why not? If you talk about, well, what did you do? And I asked someone the other day that I consider knowledgeable relative to Virginia government, somewhat qualifies as a spokesperson for expertise. I said, well, if you come and knock on my door, you're coming from out of state, you knock on my door, you tell me you want me to vote for such and such a person. And in this instance, I use the instance of Mr. McAuliffe, and tell me what that was accomplished when he was there. And he said to me, well, and he speaks about Democrats as well, they've legalized marijuana. I said, what? I'm happy for that. Well, we've made criminal justice reform. I said, how and where? And they were the only two things this person said to me. I don't mind telling you, I was shocked. And so the answer to your question, Bill, is that you tell me what you see that they may claim that is something that those at the bottom rung of the ladder historically should be pleased about and happy about it and go right and saying, we got to have you because you're with us. The question is, who is us and who is we, like Tonto and the Lone Ranger on those occasions. I think Democrats as well as Republicans both need never forget that the people are ahead and they are the ones that need to be served. We are their servants. And we need to remind ourselves that we work for the people. Never forget it.
All right, former Governor Douglas Wilder joining us tonight. Thank you so much for your time. As he said, it's still very early and we have a long night ahead of us.
And one of the other issues on the ballot, not just candidates, but voters in Richmond are deciding whether or not to move forward with the proposal to bring a casino to the south side of the city.
Our Leland Pender joins us live with more on the casino vote. Leland?
Yeah, Candace and Bill, behind the gubernatorial race, for voters here in the city of Richmond, this is probably what they're thinking about second most. The question is, what will Richmonders decide? Now, of course, let's rewind a little bit and go back to 2019. That's when gaming became legal in Virginia. And following that, we saw several companies bring in proposals for development of casinos around the state. And last year, we saw casinos vote or pass overwhelmingly in 4 other Virginia cities: Portsmouth, Bristol, Hampton, and Danville as well. But the vote here in Richmond, it seems to be a little more split and maybe not as sure of a bet as some people might have thought it was going to be. So, of course, you have folks on both sides of this issue. people who are not in favor of it, their biggest concern is the type of business this is. They're worried that it's going to actually be a detriment to the city and the immediate surrounding community more than a help. We've heard talk about it being a tax on the poor for entertainment. There's been concerns about gambling addiction. There's been concerns about the casino extracting or taking wealth out of a community that already doesn't have a lot of wealth there to begin with. So whatever exists would disappear even further. But then again, those who support it say, well, this is actually really good for the South Side in particular, because this part of the South Side where the casino is proposed is in need of some TLC and some development and economic spurring of economic growth. They talk about how it's not really near neighborhoods in this proposed location, so there's no effects in that way. They talk about the green space that they'll provide for everyone in the city to use. And also, those who support it would want you to remember that it's not just a casino. There's going to be a huge luxury hotel and an entertainment venue that would see hundreds of concerts a year and draw people from in the city and surrounding areas. But again, those who oppose it feel like it's a big, flashy idea, and it's not going to be the big revenue generator or economic burst that the city needs. Take a look at, or take a listen rather, to what some voters had to say earlier today.
I think that bottom line is great for the community, great for the tax base, and great for the school systems.
The casino isn't really the solution to invigorate, the community, and I don't believe that it's going to be successful in what it claims to do, and like providing jobs and like building wealth in Richmond.
Yeah, that's right. And as far as those jobs go, developers say this project would bring about 1,300 jobs at good pay, which is desperately needed in the area. And not to mention the economic benefit immediately for the city of Richmond receiving a payment of $25 million up front. And again, not just that immediate payment, but the tax revenue that would be drawn for this over several years. Schools stand to benefit, infrastructure stands to benefit, and so many other areas of the city as far as what that money would go toward. But again, people on both sides, I think everyone can agree that the revenue is needed and the South Side could use some kind of transformational project, but some folks say this isn't it. Other folks say it certainly is. And by the way, as far as endorsements go, we've seen a lot of prominent people in the city say vote yes for this. That includes Mayor LeVar Stoney, Governor Northam, some South Side activist, City Councilman Mike Jones. And as far as a prominent no vote, the one that comes to mind right now is that of Senator Tim Kaine, who is among that crowd that feels this isn't the way to spur growth in the city or draw that revenue for the city as well. Bill and Candace.
Leland, thank you very much. We'll keep watching. Let's take a look at the numbers. Again, the latest results in the big races in our area. This is the race for governor. You can see Glenn Younkin leading right now, 56% to Terry McAuliffe's 43%. Pence is blending with 1%. This is with 60% of the precincts reporting.
And in the race for lieutenant governor with 59% in, Winsome Sears with a 56-44 lead over Hala Ayala. That's about 200,000 votes separating them again with 59% in.
And the race for Virginia's Attorney General. Right now, we're seeing Jason Miyares leading with 55%, Mark Herring 45%, 60% of the precincts reporting.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back. Thanks for joining us as we are streaming live now on our streaming channel for continuous election coverage. I'm Bill Fitzgerald.
I'm Candace Burns. We have a team of reporters and experts tonight to break down all of the results and the issues that matter to you, the voter. Right now, we're standing in front of our interactive map here with our political analyst, Dr. Bob Holdsworth. Thank you for being here with us. And we have a lot to talk about here, starting with the governor's race.
Yeah, well, first you just see an enormous amount of red out here, and we've always seen that to some degree, but what's happened is that all out here in the Southwest, where the Republicans have been winning with 70, 75%, tonight they're winning with 80, 85%. They're just running up margins that are useful for Glenn Younkin everywhere. And then when we get to the Richmond area, for example, we haven't yet seen from the city of Richmond. I expect it's going to be heavily Democratic. But when we get to Henrico, which is a blue county, but it's not as blue tonight as it normally is. And then we get to Chesterfield, Hanover, red counties. And so what we're seeing overall is Glenn Younkin running up better margins than he thought he was going to run up everywhere, and Terry McAuliffe running behind in most places, the margin he thought was necessary.
We can actually flip over and see what the 2017 governor's race looked like and see how the map changed. Obviously, we're still waiting for Richmond's numbers to come in, but just to give a look at how the colors have changed on this map. Still waiting for, obviously, votes to be counted.
So you saw it there in Hanover. Gillespie got 64%, Younkin got 68%.
And basically, you were talking about some of these areas like Henrico and Chesterfield, just as you saw in the southwestern counties, the numbers not running as strong, for example, in a blue county, not getting enough blue votes compared to the last time around. So basically, we're seeing signs all across the state, kind of an even pull in the direction of Younkin.
Right. It's hard for me to imagine right now how McAuliffe is going to win this race. It seems to me that he can narrow the margin with some of the votes that he left to come in Richmond City, in Northern Virginia. But when you take a look at what is happening statewide, locality by locality, it just doesn't seem possible right now for Terry McAuliffe to be the governor.
Let's take a look at some of the other races here. We can take a look at the lieutenant governor's race with Hala Ayala and Winsome Sears. You're saying that down the ticket, you're thinking that it's kind of clear what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing much difference here. I mean, there was some thought that we might see this split ticket voting, particularly for, let us say, the Attorney General's race, because Mark Herring had been a two-term Attorney General, but he's in the same position. He's 10 points behind. He's going to narrow the margin somewhat, but it's still hard to see how he gets 10 points difference with what's left on the map there.
Do we know whether or not all the early votes have been released, or again, as we said earlier on, you've got to know it's really jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Yeah, some are going to do it early right away. Others may, 8:30 at night now, and we still might not have some.
Right, we don't know all the votes for sure. And again, there's been local options. So Chesterfield is putting in the early votes last and had about 65,000 early votes. We haven't seen them come in yet, as far as I could tell. On the other hand, the early votes are in Fairfax County and Arlington County, up in Northern Virginia. So we know what's happened up there. And that was very good for Terry McAuliffe, but probably not good enough on that sense.
And that's something you're also seeing in the House of Delegates tonight. We understand that there have been a few calls, some of the ones that we knew would be called. Dolores McQuinn holding on to her seat tonight. But it does seem that a lot of the contested ones right now are all leaning Republican or almost about to be called Republican.
Yeah, Republicans need 6 seats to gain the majority. And as we look at these seats around Virginia, there's a couple where they are almost surely going to win, 2 or 3 that basically are almost called, you might say. And then there are a number that are very close, but they have a lead. So, for example, 2 big races in Henrico County with Mary Kastelberg running against Rodney Willett, who's the incumbent. And then we have Christopher Holmes running against Schuyler Van Valkenburg. In both of those races right now, too early to call, Republicans are in the lead. And they would be 2 huge steps forward for the Republican Party, having lost those seats in Western Henrico. If they could recapture them, it would be a celebration tonight for the Republicans in Henrico.
And then we're going to start to hear that RW word, a red wave. Is that possible tonight?
It's pretty close. I mean, when you think about a statewide sweep for the 3 statewide offices that the Republicans have, and if they are then able to take the House, that leaves the Democrats with a 21-19 majority in the Senate, with Winsome Sears then, if she gets elected the governor, as the tie-breaking vote. One Democratic defection, and then all of a sudden you have a Republican lieutenant governor breaking the tie. I've been joking to say that perhaps Joe Morrissey will become the Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema of the Virginia Democratic Senate.
Would he welcome that role?
Well, it wouldn't be just Joe. It would be any single Democrat could actually sort of gum up the Democratic Party's works at any time there. So if this continues the way I think it's going tonight, it's going to be an extraordinarily dramatic shift in Virginia politics tomorrow morning.
Wow. Well, thank you, Dr. Bob. We're going to keep an eye on these maps. We appreciate you breaking down what it all means for us, as always. We do want to go and check in on Jake Burns. He's actually with the Younkin campaign in Northern Virginia. Jake, there must be lots of excitement right now.
Yeah, you know, Candace, it's pretty muted to this point, mostly just people milling about and having a drink or two. You can definitely sense the energy level, though, increasing in this place. In fact, I have Fox News on the TVs back behind me. Just a second ago, they were doing the heat map like we have at CBS 6 News, and they pointed out 2 very specific counties that Dr. Bob touched on, in fact, Virginia Beach and also Chesterfield. Both of them right now leaning heavily towards Glenn Younkin. We knew that was going to be a possibility, but when you look at the importance of those districts, of those counties, excuse me, you knew that that was going to place that Younkin really wanted to win. He told us he thought he had a good chance in Chesterfield. He had a good chance in Virginia Beach, places that obviously had not been trending that way. So we know that that's the case, and we know that seems like what's heading to this evening. Again, everything completely unofficial tonight, but Younkin has really focused himself on voters and their message to parents in particular. And we had a chance in Chesterfield County yesterday to meet up with a few of them as they were at a rally for Mr. Younkin, his final one in Central Virginia. So just listen to a few of the reasons they feel like this year and this candidate is the one for them.
I think the energy is there. I think Virginians are really waking up, and Virginians encompass everybody who's moved here, no matter where you're from.
I've begged my school board representative to listen to not only me, but also many other parents in our community who are concerned about what's being put in our children's minds and what they're being forced to wear on their faces in class.
I'm not happy with a lot of laws that have been, brought into play. And so, I feel like, hey, this is my time. If we don't win now, then it might be really hard in the future.
That young voice right there, a voter from Chesterfield County. In fact, now we mentioned earlier that the energy is increasing, a lot of smiling faces I see, and people taking pictures and selfies with the Younkin background. But what we want to do is kind of point out some of the dignitaries here. In fact, former Governor Jim Gilmore, Republican, is just standing over here to my right. So I'm going to go try to talk to him real quick and send it back to you in the studio. We'll bring you an update with what he has to say later on.
All right, thank you, Jake, for that update. Let's check in now with the McAuliffe campaign. That's where our Cameron Thompson has been all evening. And Cam, we seem to be sensing something of a Republican wave tonight. What's the vibe you're getting there?
Well, while getting that sense, again, those that I'm talking to so far among the Democratic Party are saying to hold up and wait for all of the early votes to come in. Again, making a big deal about the over 1.1 million that cast an early ballot, including Senator Mark Warner, and talking about how, looking at last election, he pointed to his race about how late it was till it actually ended up with him being in the lead, waiting for those early votes to come in. And talking with some of the McAuliffe staffers, they were talking about some of the early results that they were getting in, coming in, as we actually have the senator making his way to some of the other TV stations doing the rounds right now as we speak. And they were talking about some of the returns in some of those big areas that they're watching in Loudoun County, and those they said that their original, or the first batch of numbers that came in were a percentage point above what they were predicting. And here so far, again, with the that they are not feeling discouraged with what has been coming in so far, that they think that they can still pull this off, especially getting those early votes coming in. And again, as you saw, Senator Mark Warner walking through our screen among those here. Mayor LeVar Stoney has been seen around. We have local Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, State Senator Jennifer McClellan. And again, talking with Warner about 15 minutes ago as we were starting to see the results come in, he is saying that we might be in for a long night.
I can just remind folks in the Richmond area last year, when I was very lucky to win by a large margin, bigger than the president's, it wasn't until about 10:30 that my vote actually went ahead. So I would urge folks, grab a beer, get a pizza, or a beverage of your choice, and settle in. We got a couple more hours of this.
And again, talking to him as well, as they've said, looking at Virginia as sort of a barometer for what might happen in the 2022 midterms. Hoping to talk to Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger about that next time I see you. Working for you in Northern Virginia, Kevin Thompson, CBS 6 News.
All right, thanks, Cam. We're going to head to Washington, the U.S. Capitol now, where our Joe St. George is standing by. We've been checking with him all evening. Joe, what can you tell us from the Capitol?
Well, a lot of, as a reminder, that this is impacting Virginia, but it's also impacting the country because this is an off-year election. Virginia's in the national spotlight, so Democrats, Republicans from across the country are paying attention to these results. And what are these results showing us right now? Yes, we can say it's early, but we're also seeing a trend. I mean, Dr. Bob highlighted the same thing that my sources are telling me. A shift's happening. What is the two shift? What's the reason that Glenn Younkin is in the lead? One, rural Virginia. In some counties, I was looking at Rockingham County, for instance, voters there are supporting Glenn Younkin by a higher percentage point than they supported Donald Trump. Now, they're not major population centers, so Glenn Younkin needed to do something else in order to win this election tonight. He needs to win or shift suburbia. You look at Chesterfield County, a Republican source who has worked on campaigns across the country said he didn't see a path to victory for Terry McAuliffe unless he won Chesterfield County by 1.5 percentage points. The last time I hit my refresh button, it was an 11 percentage point lead for Glenn Younkin in Chesterfield County. A shift has happened in suburbia. You head up north to Loudoun County, a county that Joe Biden won by 60,000 votes or so last year. Terry McAuliffe's leading in Loudoun County, but not nearly by the margins that Democrats did 1 year ago. A different election, but again, those are the trends. Now, what is McAuliffe hoping for? Well, he's hoping for major Democratic strongholds to pump up that vote total. But these trends are becoming very apparent, not just to Democrats in Virginia, but Democrats across the country at this hour. Rural Virginia voting more strongly, at least right now, for Republicans. And suburbia is where so often elections are decided, and you're seeing a shift towards Glenn Younkin. Fascinating numbers coming in. Dr. Bob breaking it down, but I'm seeing the same thing here in D.C. that you guys are seeing down I-95 in Richmond.
All right, that's some good stuff. Thank you, Joe. Chesterfield, of course, one of the counties that everybody has been watching and could help decide this race. You heard Dr. Bob talking about it a little earlier. Our Brendan King spoke with voters there. He joins us live now with an update. Brendan?
Yeah, much quieter in the Chesterfield suburbs, Bill and Candace. The campaign workers have already left. They're long and gone, but it's the poll workers that remain inside their cars still in the parking lot here. When we visited Crenshaw Elementary School earlier today, we could tell that the energy was high for both teams, but to prove that, we have tabulated some numbers to show that the many voters in this county were excited to participate in this election. So these figures from the Chesterfield Registrar, by 2 p.m. today, more than 54,000 people had voted. There were more than 68,000 early voters cast for a total of 122,737 votes in the county. And that total is 4,000 more votes than the entire vote total of Chesterfield in 2017. You may remember that's when Democrat Ralph Northam narrowly beat his Republican challenger Ed Gillespie by just 700 votes in Chesterfield. At the time, experts say that may have been a sign that the county was changing. Well, I spoke to several voters today. Listen to what brought them out to the polls.
You know, I am a first-generation immigrant, so I had to earn the right to vote, and I had to apply for citizenship to be able to vote, and so hopefully that means they will continue to exercise their rights to vote.
Having a say in my children's education. Taxes are high right now. Inflation, of course, is through the roof.
Yeah, I did hear education was top of mind for many voters that I talked to throughout the day, but now it's a sit and wait. Now we have to wait for the volunteers and those local registrars who have literally been working overtime for months and months on this campaign. Now we're waiting for them to tabulate the results. And by the way, I last checked, Younkin leads McAuliffe by 8,000 votes here in Chesterfield County. Working for you, I'm Brendan King, CBS 6 News.
Brendan. And we're joined now by Dr. Jatia Wrighton. She's a professor in the Political Science Department at VCU. Dr. Wrighton, you conduct research on black women, state legislatures, and leadership. First of all, thank you for joining us. And what are you seeing tonight? What's the vibe you're getting from this particular election?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. So it's a really, really interesting and dynamic election. In particular, you have a third-party candidate, Princess Blanding, that I think that you really have to consider her effect as it pertains to the Black vote. Even just looking at the numbers early on, she's pulling about 10,000, 11,000 votes, and those are predominantly going to be from Black voters. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that will affect Terry McAuliffe's numbers, because we've seen in the past in Virginia, Black voters make the difference, especially for Democrats, who wins. And so, right now it seems, Terry McAuliffe is going to need all the votes that he can get. And Black voters are going to be the ones that make that difference. And so adding Princess Blanding into this race is really going to have an interesting effect on the turnout. And it's also sending a message that maybe, we need to think about not only our two-party system, but also as it relates to third parties and maybe bringing them into the fold, especially as it relates to Princess Blanding's policy agenda and her platform.
From your perspective, what was the Black voter turnout for this election? And do you think some of the issues that are most concerning to the community were addressed in the leading up to Election Day?
As it relates to the Black community, I think what's important to recognize is that historically Black voters have really had a choice between a candidate who is not going to actively harm the Black community and one that will. And so as Blacks experience a very marginalized, oppressed experience in the United States, it's often that the two-party choices aren't ideal any way that you kind of situate it. And so in thinking of it in that way, Black voters are going to turn out. It's not only, in terms of, our ancestors have died for this right to vote, but it's also this idea that Black voters know what's at stake because they are the ones that are going to feel the impact of policies that are going to overwhelmingly disadvantage the Black community. And so they're going to turn out. And thinking about trying to get Black voters motivated, there's not much that has to be done because they feel the brunt of these policies more so than maybe majority, population. Additionally, when you're thinking about race, right, no one's mentioned up to this point this critical race theory in education, because that's really what the underlying context is. When Younkin employs this critical race theory and this fear for white suburban families, it's really this dog whistle of sorts to sort of suggest that race and conversation about Brown and Black people are going to be important or included in education. And that's something that you should fear. And that's really the Younkin's campaign and take on education. And really what this is a throwback to a lot of Jim Crow era type of, a campaigning, really, right? So it's this idea that there's a fear of brown and black people, and Younkin has really capitalized that through his use of critical race theory, and may I say inappropriately applied critical race theory in our understanding as it relates to K through 12. Also, the popularity of Younkin right now, and the progression that Virginia has made in the past, really is historically also we've seen before in the past. So if you think about it, the Civil War ushered in Reconstruction. Reconstruction lasted for 12 years. After Reconstruction, there was 100 years of Jim Crow policies. And so the idea that, Virginia has moved in more progressive direction, and then we see this pushback as it relates to Younkin and these, conservative policies is really not surprising. So I think that this election really crystallizes the fact that until we confront racism and sexism within our society, we're going to continue to see this type of cyclical pushback from progression.
Well, and if you're correct in that the Younkin campaign was raising some of these specters that you said, the dog whistles, did the Democrats not respond appropriately? Did the McAuliffe campaign not take them seriously, or simply not address those issues at least enough to sort of pull in the black community, the black and brown community?
So the Democratic candidate, Terry McAuliffe, pulled in the black and brown community because, like I said, the choice is really between a candidate that's going to actively harm the black community and one that is not. And so that's really not the issue. The issue would be the Democratic Party doesn't necessarily know how to address this idea about critical race theory, because when all is said and done, and if you listen to these parents at these school board meetings, they don't really understand what critical race theory is. And K through 12 education is not teaching critical race theory. And so then it's like, how do you address misinformation or misunderstanding or, false information that's being given out? And I think that has been the difficulty for the Democratic Party really since the Trump administration, that once you are faced with some sort of falsehood, you either have a choice, you either address it, even though you know it's false, and so giving it more credence and more credibility and giving it more traction, or you try to address it in a way that is really nonsensical because what you're trying to address in the first place does not make sense, right? Critical race theory is not what's being taught. It's a theoretical framework that's really found in higher education. And so, this idea that if we learn about black and brown people's history, in some ways you are disadvantaging white students is really a difficult logical explanation or a logical discussion to follow. And so maybe the Democrats, could have addressed it in a different way, but I'm actually not sure what that would look like, right? Because I don't really understand how Republicans are framing critical race theory, because it's not the appropriate understanding of that theoretical framework.
All right, Professor Jatia Wrighton, Poli-Sci Department at VCU. We thank you for your time on this election night.
We have panelists joining us tonight to talk about the election and the issues that matter, and we want to go to them now.
All right, let's start with you, Gary Flowers. Now we've been talking, we're not going to say red wave because it's too early, but it does look like a lot of the votes are breaking Glenn Youngkin's way, Democrats in the state assembly. What are you thinking right now as these numbers are coming in?
Well, first and foremost, I want to pick up on what dear doctor said about the respect or lack thereof of the black community. What I've learned in 35 years of politics is in the black community, if you don't respect us, don't expect us. And that's been true year after year. Also, she mentioned a blacklash of sorts. We look at American history, particularly political history, where there's a real or perceived advancement for black people, there is a backlash, or what we call a blacklash, by the white community. One of my mentors, Dr. Ronald Walters, wrote a book, Black Interest, White Nationalism. It's instructive on this point. Then we have to look at critical race theory. It's a long phrase of sorts, but it's really just history. It's just teaching what happened. And so to throw that out as somehow negative means that in some circles, white people are so ashamed of their ancestors' deeds that they don't want their children and grandchildren to even learn about it. And then we have to deal with the two-party winner-take-all system in America. Our allies around the world, Germany, France, England, and others all have constitutional republics, but parliamentary systems that allow for 3 parties,
or 4,
5 parties,
5 or 10.
7 parties. I had the honor of working on the South African elections of 1994. 14 parties. But most of the electorate was represented. When you have a 2-party winner-take-all system, we've seen from national politics to state that there is an obstructionist party, then there's a party accused of overreach, as was said earlier. At the end of the day, my voices of the village, the listeners of the Gary Flowers show, mostly told me that, yeah, I'm probably going to vote Democratic, but I'm holding my nose because it's a lesser of 2 evils. We have a poignant point in American history, particularly after the protests in the street that said we need constructive change. We need to abolish the 2-party winner-take-all system and make it more representative of the American people.
Well, and John, is there room in the Republican Party for those that were protesting, for those that say, hey, it's the lesser of 2 evils? How do you address that?
I think it depends on what issues you're talking about. I think the Republican Party is going to wind up gaining votes here with people who had previously rejected them, maybe because they were frustrated by President Trump and some of the initiatives that he put forward. But I've got to reiterate, I can tell, Gary, that you're a true believer, and I respect your political.
But there's a but coming.
Well, there is. But you know, I've been through this with my party, where I think there's a point at which you think, you know what, we're right, and we believe this, and we want this, and you go into office, and then you overreach, and you push through, instead of 3 or 4 pieces of legislation, which people might have said, okay, we'll go with that. You know, it feels a little uncomfortable to me. We'll go with that. You go for 10, you go for 12, and then suddenly some issue like the Loudoun County issue comes up, and you've gone so far to the right or to the left that the public rejects you. And I think that's probably what happened.
We'll disagree on that.
Okay, well, but I think the voters are going to agree with me tonight, and I think that's why you're looking at districts like, you know, 93rd District, Mike Mullen, who was the Democrat who put forward the legislation that arguably allowed the circumstance in Loudoun County to happen. It appears that Jordan Gray, who's a school teacher, hasn't run for anything, I don't think, before in the past. It looks like he is about to beat Mike Mullen. And then you look at the 72nd District, one of my home districts in Henrico, where Schuyler von Valkenburg, the incumbent Democrat, looks like maybe Chris Holmes, who's a newcomer to Republican politics, an African-American male, he may beat Schuyler von Valkenburg. That's kind of an upset, I think, for a lot of people who are looking at this. So you look at those districts, you look at the other district that I mentioned earlier with the former Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox, Mike Cherry, the Republican who's trying to regain that seat. I think some people who might have said to Republicans, and just to be blunt, I don't agree with this, but I think a lot of voters looked at Donald Trump and said, enough of this, we're tired of this. I think a lot of voters have said enough of the leftward lurch, sincere as it may be from Democrat voters. We've had too much, we need to return to the middle. It's frustrating, because I'm a true believer on the other side. It's frustrating to deal with that because you think you're right, and you think you've done your best to convince everyone that you're right, but I think the Democrat Party is going to get a slap of the face here, and they got to reevaluate.
I think you set up a false dichotomy. I'm not a true believer on either side. I am a true believer that we have to abolish the current system and make it more representative of the entire electorate with either 3 or 5 or perhaps 7 political parties.
Yeah. That would be interesting. You know, Princess Blanding, I know you all had a chance to talk to Princess Blanding. She would not come on my show in the morning, which was frustrating to me because, look, I'm not going to agree with her, but I wanted to give her an opportunity to speak. So I enjoyed hearing your interview with her, Bill, you know, to try to understand where she was on the political spectrum and what she was advocating. I think those voices need to be given an opportunity to speak in the society so you don't have violence in the streets. I mean, I don't know whether it'll be next summer or 10 summers from now, but we need to hear from people who have opinions that are outside of the two-party system. How about that? We can maybe come to some
You're on the on-ramp.
some sort of agreement there. I like that.
Okay, so indulge us for a second. So what do you envision then, John, is Glenn Younkin's, he said what his first day in office is going to be, but a couple of years down the road, what are we going to look at in terms of policies that he's been able to implement, assuming the legislature is agreeable?
Yeah, I think people are going to look at the school system and say, are we continuing to advance based on objective analysis of achievement, or are we going into a system where we're going to pick winners and losers based on something else? Will it be race? Will it be a geographic location in the state? I think most parents, white, black, Asian, Latino, can say, hey, my kid, I want my kid judged based on the grades they deliver based on objective testing. And I want, if I'm disciplined and I make my kid come home and do homework every night, and I'm trying to drive them to get into advanced placement courses because I want them to be able to go to a great university or college, then I want that opportunity for my child. And I think the worry that has somehow been removed from the table, that objective ability to earn your place in society, that scared a lot of people this election cycle. And I think there were indications that if Republicans were not given an opportunity to right the ship a little bit, that would disappear, and we'd lose an entire generation of people who suddenly couldn't earn their place in society.
I'm interested, Gary, do you have a response to what was just said? Do you agree?
No.
What about using standards? I mean,
I don't mind using standards, but let's teach history, okay, on the question of critical race theory. The Commonwealth of Virginia, like the Dillon Rule in other aspects, has independent school districts that have autonomy on what's the curriculum in that district. That doesn't make any sense. There should be a federal standard in terms of what is taught to American students in this country. Last time I checked, American students were 17th in reading, 24th in math, 26th in science around the world, and we're bickering over what to teach and allowing Hanover County, known for its recalcitrant racism, to have one standard and another county a separate one. That is nonsensical. We have to grow out of that. And the people see the mores, and when they see it, they don't like the product.
Can I just say about the education issue that I would agree with you, we need to teach the good and the bad, but I think there's been a concern amongst a lot of folks that we're teaching people to hate each other rather than objectively analyze.
Where did that come from? Okay, the Southern strategy of the Republican Party of Goldwater.
Look,
where did that come
I'm not
from?
going to go back and relitigate the 60s and 70s. I'll talk about
well, it's part of history.
I don't know.
You sound like a parent that doesn't want to teach history.
Here in 2021, though, I think, look at how we teach 9/11. We just had the 20th anniversary of 9/11. If we would take the care to teach American history the way we discuss 9/11, not trying to indict and impugn innocent people who are alive today for what occurred 20 years ago, or people who weren't directly associated with those attacks, I think we'd all be better off. And I'm getting the impression that there are a lot of people who want to relitigate the Civil War with modern day characters being responsible for the activities of 150 years ago. And I think a lot of people, and I'm in that group, I'm not interested in that. I'm happy to sit and discuss the sordid side of Virginia history and discuss that and talk through it and talk about the bad things that happened in certain cities and towns in this community, in this state. But if at the end of that conversation, I as a white guy walk out going, oh damn, everybody's looking at me like I'm a horrible person, that's a problem.
No, not at all. No, you are who you are, but we're not asking you to apologize for your ancestors' dirty deeds. We're only asking you to help dismantle the systemic institutions from which you still benefit, and you inherited wealth. And so not to see that and talk and to phrase it as we want to relitigate the past is prolonged.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that my great-grandfather coming from Ireland 2 generations ago
maybe he did, maybe he didn't. He benefited from being white.
He certainly benefited from being white.
That's it.
So
that's
what am I supposed to do about that, other than have a candid conversation?
You're supposed to work with me and others in helping dismantle those institutions that benefited him and may have benefited you too.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. It's a fascinating discussion, a lot of topics, and some might say it's surprising that the monuments didn't come up more in this campaign that we just saw, that almost seemed like the other issues were more salient at this time, but it would go to that history that you're both referring to.
The monuments were symbols, but the ideology is reflected on that map there.
We're going to have to leave it there.
Thank you.
We're going to take a look for a moment. We're going to come back to you, though, at some of the latest results.
Let's start with the governor's race here. We have Glenn Younkin with 55%, Terry McAuliffe 45%, and Princess Blanding 1%.
78% reporting, so 22% to go. Here's the lieutenant governor's race with 77% in. Winsome Sears maintaining that 55% to 45% over Hala Ayala, and again, that is 77% in.
And for the attorney general's race, Jason Miyares, 54%, Mark Herring, 46%, the incumbent with 7.
Currently 2-1 against with 1% in. Now is the time we'd like to talk to City Council member Mike Jones. He has been a proponent of this proposal, actually, this casino. While it's not technically in his district, it's in Reva Trammell's district. Dr. Jones, you've been a huge supporter of this project.
Why did you support it?
Well, first of all, good evening to everybody. Happy election night. The reason why I support this project is because it is an economic development deal. You're talking about someone coming into the city, investing $500 million of their own money. No city abatements, no TIF discussions as we had with prior deals. And it's going into an economically developed, depressed area within our city. And so, when I look at all the pluses, all the positives, all the negatives, they just far outweigh it from just from an economic development deal. All you have down there are warehouses and smokestacks, and it's an opportunity to change the economic development trajectory of this entire area.
So the economic development aspect is hugely important. Critics have said that it, in a sense, undermines the people that can least afford to be undermined, the vulnerable, those that might be susceptible to gambling, those that might, some have said, pay the tax for this entertainment. As a preacher, was there any need for you to justify or square that circle or circle that square to say that this could bring people up, pull everybody up?
Well, I think especially as you bring in the religious side as a pastor, the one thing I've tried not to do is pastor people in their houses. When they're in the house of worship, I try and share, what thus saith the Lord, and then they have to go home and make their own decisions. I am a pro-choice pastor. I believe every woman should make the decision of what she's going to do with and for her body. That's just where I am as an American Baptist preacher. So for me, for all the people that are against it, you're pro so many other things, but you don't trust people who are living in poverty to make a decision about their finances. And I think it's very paternalistic. I think it's very insulting because you got ABC liquor stores, you got convenience stores on every corner, you got plasma stores. These outposts in different parts of the South Side. And most of these people that are raising an issue, they're not on the South Side. They're not going to be here before, after, or, before, during, or after this deal goes through or not. And so for me, I live there and I have to deal with the issues that are there right now. And so, for me, I don't believe the reason why I sent it to referendum is because I fully believe the people of Richmond should decide. And that's what our vote was for on council, for the people of Richmond to decide. And I am pro-democratic in that process. Now, as far as me personally, professionally, it's still just a good deal. We already have gambling in the city. And we can go as small as the lottery, bingo halls, gray machines and convenience stores, or we can go with Rosie's Gaming Emporium, which is on Midlothian Turnpike. No one said a thing when it came in through by right zoning. And so it's like, why the outrage now? And so there's some very, interesting questions that we'll have on November 3rd as we move forward. But again, most of the people that have an issue, they're not going to come on the South Side and feed families and help people get jobs. And most of the people that have an issue, from you Crops, Tim Kaine on down the list, they're not there on a day-to-day basis to help the average daily South Sider.
So what were you hearing from the people on the South Side when you talked to them about bringing a casino into their neighborhood?
Well, and again, let's dispel this. It was the NIMBYism within certain neighborhoods in Richmond, both North Side and off of Forest Hill Avenue, that said they didn't want it in their neighborhood. Where Urban One is, where one casino is going, where it's projected, it's not in anyone's neighborhood. It really isn't. It's down by Philip Morris, down by a couple other plants. So it's not in anyone's backyard. Where Rosie's, it's literally on the other side of my subdivision. And so that one's in a neighborhood. And again, so many people were silent during this process when it was just able to come in. We haven't seen a rise in crime. We haven't seen a rise in a lot of the ills that they talk about. And again, far be it from me to tell people how to spend their discretionary income. My mother died from smoking, from the impact of smoking. So should I then go on this tirade of trying to eradicate smoking just because my mother died? And people die every year because of it. And so again, but my mother made the choice. She made the choice to smoke. So people are going to choose to gamble. People are going to choose to drink. People are going to choose to, use, marijuana. And that's the case. And so I think it's up to each individual to make that choice.
What is the example that you would point to say, hey, here's a casino and resort that came into a community and look at this community thriving? Is there a particular bright spot that you would point to say this could happen here in Richmond?
Well, I mean, if you look at Rosie's, where Rosie's is, one of the things I talked to him about was improving the footprint of the Midlothian Turnpike corridor. We had 2 shootings at that Motel 6 within a 6-month period. And so when they came in, I just wanted to know what type of, neighbor are you going to be? How are you going to impact this area positively? And so they put up a ton of lights, cameras. There are, they've got security in and throughout there, but, they're not the issue right now. They're not. Poverty is the real issue. And this poverty was there long before any casinos came around, and they're going to be there long after. So we have to really get to the root of what's causing poverty in this country. And most of the people that are against it, they're not coming up with the solution in how to get individuals high-paying jobs, because Rosie's, they pay people $15 an hour. And so that was a discussion we dealt with a year or so ago. So they're doing the right things.
All right, Richmond City Council member Mike Jones, thank you, sir, for taking the time tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, we are going to go over now to the map on the screen, the full screen here, and talk to our esteemed political expert, Dr. Bob. You've been very patient with us tonight, and we're going to make this thing happen so we can show folks what's going on. Is there a particular area right now that you think is showing us what's happening tonight in terms of, and we're not going to call it a red wave just yet, but we may be in the midst of that right now?
Well, why don't you go down to outside of Norfolk, see if you can hit Chesapeake, Virginia Beach down there.
Right on it, zoom on in. Right.
Well, I think it's going to bring up the Richmond on the Zoom, but we can at least highlight. So 52% and 60-40 right now. We're looking at Younkin, McAuliffe. About half the vote is counted. There's a difference of 5,700 votes. What is this showing us about what's happening tonight?
Well, what it's showing us is that in these rural areas, it's just a wipeout for Glenn Younkin, just running very, very well. The second thing that it's showing is that in these outer suburban areas, the Hanover counties of Virginia, he's also running very well. Stafford County, where Joe Biden carried up in Northern Virginia, Younkin's carrying it this evening. So you're seeing that happening. And then finally, you're seeing the blue areas in a number of instances, in several instances, such as Henrico County, aren't quite as blue as they've normally been. So as more votes come in, we are going to see this narrow. It's not going to be a 200,000 vote margin that we see right now, because Richmond hasn't come in yet, and Richmond's going to be heavily Democratic. There's still votes to come in up in Fairfax and probably Arlington, and they're going to be heavily Democratic. So we're going to see some kind of narrowing. But I don't see the pathway right now to the number of votes that Terry McAuliffe is going to need to counter this 10% margin that he's running on the deficiency now.
And if we're at 97% in Henrico, does that mean we could still be waiting for a big dump of early votes? That we
Yeah. I don't know what exactly how Henrico is doing it, whether it's doing the early votes first or the early votes last. Certainly, you could imagine that margin going up in Henrico, but again, it's not as large enough margin to actually change the dynamic of the gubernatorial race right now. What we're really looking at in Henrico are these two very close House of Delegate races, where two incumbents, Rodney Willett and Schuyler Van Valkenburg, are locked in really tough races right now with Castleberg and Holmes, and they're both at the moment losing. And so those could be dramatic races if that occurs in Henrico. If all of a sudden Western Henrico, which has been shifting to the Democrats, moves back to the Republican camp tonight, that would be dramatic.
Because we've been talking in recent elections how blue Henrico has become. But when you look at the numbers right now for governor, for example, that are in so far, again, we don't know if 97% is actually 97% because there could be a big batch out there. But I mean, if Younkin is within 9 points, that would suggest considerable strength.
Yeah, if he's within 9,000 votes in Henrico, that's a very good outcome. Let me just say, if he's within 20,000 votes in Henrico, that's a pretty good outcome for Younkin this evening. And so what we've seen in Henrico in the past is that for a while we had a divided county, Eastern Henrico being Democratic, Western Henrico being Republican, and that shifted. In a number of races, we all of a sudden saw Western Henrico move to the Democrats. In this House of Delegates race tonight, and it looks like in the Younkin race, that might be shifting back again.
And those two that you pointed to in Henrico, they're among a dozen or so that are trending in those directions where the Republican is leading a Democratic incumbent.
Yeah, Republicans need 6 seats to take the House tonight. I've counted 3 for sure that they have, and they have a whole set of other opportunities that are still on the table. The places where the Democrats thought they had opportunities look like they're collapsing right now, and it looks like the Republicans have a number of seats firmly in hand and could actually go well beyond the 6 if things break their way in a number of these close races.
I just turned the heat on so you can kind of see how red some of the localities are, how blue some of the localities are. Is any of this surprising to you? We knew that the rural areas, the southern parts of the state, were going to be really red, but do you see anything else here that you find interesting?
Yeah, well, certainly they become deeper red.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in what has happened around the Washington, the Northern Virginia outer suburbs.
We can see
because these are places, you know, when you go to Fredericksburg, up to Stafford, Spotsylvania, where the Republicans are doing better than they expected to do on that sense. And then the other place I'd like to, where they ran up these very large margins, are up here in the valley. Look at Rockingham County and outside of the Harrisonburg area. Harrisonburg's a city where I think the Democrats probably will win. But all the way up that Northwest Valley has been a very good time for the Republicans as well this evening. And again, what I've been surprised by is the margins. Not that they just won, but you know, when you're trying to calculate what the margin would likely be, you might say some of these places, well, we know they were going to win 70%, but then they won 77% or 75%. And that changes when the Democrats carry Henrico, but not by as much as they thought they were going to. And that's what's happened all over Virginia.
All right. Well,
thank you, Dr. Bob.
Thank you for that tutorial. And we're obviously going to keep watching that and try to find out if, in fact, all the numbers are in that seem to be in. Is 97 really 97?
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have an election night if we weren't wondering about something, right?
Exactly right. All right. We'll talk to you in just a moment. Meantime, the results for the casino referendum, you heard us talking about it just a moment ago, are slowly coming in. Just a few minutes ago, you heard from City Council member Mike Jones, who's in favor of the one resort, a casino. Now Victoria Cobb with the Family Foundation joins us. And Ms. Cobb, what are you seeing for Richmond if this referendum does pass?
Well, certainly we have not been supportive of this casino coming into town. And I think that we have seen, and the numbers bear it out in casinos all across the country, that for every dollar that supposedly the government makes and is new revenue, we find there's actually $3 in social costs. And that's lives that are broken. The bottom line is addiction happens. It's not something that's imaginary, and it's not just that these casinos draw tourists. In fact, they make most of their money from local problem gamblers. And that's what we don't want to see happen to our families here in Richmond.
But what about the jobs? We've heard so much about the thousands, perhaps 1,500 jobs that could be coming, and to say nothing of the economic boost. But you're saying whatever the economic boost is, the social costs are 3 times the size of that.
Well, I'd say the same thing that we said to the voters of Bristol when we were hoping that they would defeat their casino, and that is that we expect elected officials to work harder to bring jobs that are actually of benefit to our society. We believe that great jobs are important, but they don't have to be casino jobs, jobs that actually end up tearing apart people's own economic status and their own families. When we see casinos come in, we ultimately see that counties struggle. They end up in bankruptcy. This is a situation where we've got a city, and as your previous guest, Mike Jones, mentioned, he was referencing Rosie's. And actually, we have seen crime increase in the last 2 years in Midlothian, 27% increase in theft. We've seen assaults go up by 15%. It actually is bringing crime into the area. So,
well, I'm sorry, you're saying in Midlothian or around in that neighborhood, you mean, or just in the?
Yeah, no. The Midlothian crime stats for the last 2 years since Rosie has arrived. And so we can't actually say that these things are harmless. We know that social science has looked at the data and they said no. In fact, casinos coming to town look good. They're glitzy. They come with lots of money. And as we saw in this particular referendum, we're seeing that they're doing a spectacular job of spending literally, it looks like about $35 for every vote they're trying to capture, which if you take that on a statewide basis, that's a $210 million campaign for this casino. Why do they have to spend so much money? Because they have to sell us on things that just aren't going to be the case.
You brought up Mike Jones, council member Mike Jones, and he also said in the last interview that we did with him that it's not the city's job to parent people. They can make their own decisions. What do you say to that point? Because that was a big concern, that it would take advantage of people who might not be able to care for themselves in a sense.
I think there are times where government sees dollar signs and they miss the larger picture, which is that ultimately it actually costs their city. And I think that can be blinding. I think that can be something that distracts them from the heart of what they should be focused on. So yes, of course, he's sitting there saying that everybody should have their choice and we should just bring in whatever. But then he brings up smoking. It's very interesting. People have a choice to smoke. Sure. But we also ruled out smoking in restaurants. Why? Because there's secondhand smoke and it harms people. And so we actually do sometimes step in and say, why would we introduce new things that cause new harm? Typically in Virginia, when we've allowed a new form of gambling, we've actually taken that to a statewide referendum where the entire state of Virginia said, we want a lottery. The entire state of Virginia said, we want horse racing. But in this case, we just said, we're only going to let the exact city where the casino will be located actually vote. And so the outside areas that are deeply impacted don't even get a voice in this.
So what would you do if it does pass? Is there anything that can be done to educate people, to spread the word once the deal is done?
Well, certainly we're going to be relying on our social service care network to step in for the families that are going to be impacted by this. So we're going to need churches, we're going to need homeless ministries, we're going to need addiction ministries. They're going to all have to step up and help mitigate the harm that's done by this casino. Because again, it looks like great signs and flashy lights and all the promises that they make, but we know what actually happens because we can look at other casinos around the country and see the results.
All right, Victoria Cobb with the Family Foundation, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
And let's take another look at some of the latest results that are coming in so far as we start to keep counting. 82% of the vote is in. 54-45. Glenn Younkin leads Terry McAuliffe by about 208,000 votes, with 82% in.
And for the lieutenant governor race, Winsome Sears still leading 55% against Hala Ayala, 45%, 81% of the precincts reporting.
And in the race for Attorney General, again with 82% in, 54-46, Jason Miyares leading Mark Herring, again by about almost 200,000 votes, with 82% of the vote tallied thus far. And we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The election night special coverage here at CBS 6 streaming live continues. And welcome back, and thank you for joining us on our streaming channel for continuous election coverage tonight. I'm Bill Fitzgerald.
I'm Candace Burns. We have a team of reporters and experts we've been talking to all night, breaking down the results and the issues that matter to you, the voters.
And right now we're going to head up to Northern Virginia, where our Jake Burns has been with the Younkin campaign tonight. And Jake, the enthusiasm and excitement is likely building.
Oh, yeah, it definitely has, Bill. It's definitely picked up here in the past few minutes. In fact, this room back behind me, you can see earlier in our earlier coverage was not very full. People kind of milling about. They are getting packed in here because they are expecting a win tonight for the statewide GOP ticket. All three candidates seem to be heading that way. Again, we must reiterate, results unofficial. But we have been speaking with some bigwigs in the Republican Party here. We spoke with Rich Anderson. He's the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. He was just with Glenn Younkin a few minutes before we chatted with him. This is probably 20 minutes ago. At this point, he says Mr. Younkin is feeling confident, feeling good, dressed up very different than you might be used to seeing him in that sweater vest. He's actually wearing a nice suit tonight, apparently, but he says he's feeling good. They are still holding out on making any declarations at this point. That's because a lot of the early vote in some places is still out. Some votes still floating out there, but they feel very good about their ticket and where things are headed for the entire Republican Party. Of course, a party that had scuttled for many years on statewide elections. 2009, the last time they won. And so what changed this time around? We asked our RPD Chairman Anderson just that. He says he thinks it's the candidates themselves. He thinks that this maybe was a redefining moment for Virginia Republicans where they can reset the party under the image of Glenn Younkin. Of course, a former businessman, a wealthy executive worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but someone that his supporters say is very relatable and talks about the issues that are important to Virginia voters, specifically talking about the economy, his plans for that to cut taxes, the grocery tax and the gas tax, key among those policies for him, though he doesn't offer specifics on how he paid the rest of the state budget to balance it out, but also talks a lot about education and parental choice in that. And Chairman Anderson saying he really thinks that is one reason why this is happening tonight. We also spoke with former Governor Jim Gilmore. Of course, you'll remember him from the early 2000s. Many Virginians do. He is also obviously tremendously excited about this. He thinks this is really a referendum, not just on where Republicans are with their candidates, but also with where Democrats have gone in Virginia since they have been in power. He thinks many of the policies and the laws that Virginia Democrats have passed have been very unpopular with the average voter. These voters here feel like they are very much on a winning side. You can tell behind me a lot of excitement here as Fox News shows the board and what's happening, I guess, actually in New Jersey right now. But every time they show Virginia, it's obviously a big cheer as well. Another thing Governor Gilmore telling us, he really thinks that this election came down to the difference between McAuliffe and Younkin. In Younkin, someone who never took the bait when McAuliffe would try to get him to comment on something to tie him maybe closely to President Trump, something the Republicans have tried to avoid in certain elections. And so that divisiveness of the campaign, Governor Gilmore feels backfired maybe on the Democrats and really went well for Younkin. In fact, we talked with Mr. Younkin about that earlier in the day, about the divisive nature of this campaign. He has been talking a lot about culture war issues, specifically referencing those situations in Loudoun County with the alleged sexual assaults in schools, specifically referencing mask mandates, things that have been touchstones at school boards. We asked him about using that throughout his campaign. Here's what he had to say.
Divisiveness is when you make stuff up that's not true and you try to pit people against one another, and that's what my opponent has been doing. What we found is the vast majority of parents have come together around these topics of being fully engaged in their children's education. We've seen folks from all political spectrums come together. We're winning the independent vote by double digits. We've got Democrats walking across the aisle.
Governor Gilmore saying that's an important distinction right there, that he does think that Governor Younkin, if that ends up being the case, will be someone that will work like that. Democrats have tried to tie him closely to governors like Ron DeSantis in Florida or Greg Abbott, but Republicans here in Virginia feel like that might not be the kind of governor that Governor Younkin might be. Remains to be seen, of course, on the final results here, but as you can see from the excitement in this room, a lot of people are pumped up about where this night is going and what it could mean for the Republican Party of Virginia. For now, working for you in Chantilly, Jake Burns, CBS 6 News.
Is getting much fuller as the night goes on. Let's go to our Cameron Thompson now. He is also in Northern Virginia. He's with the McAuliffe camp. And when we spoke with you last, Cam, you were saying that the mood there was let's wait and see. There's still a lot of night to go.
10 points, but seeing a much different story in the polls leading up to the final days and weeks of the campaign. And about an hour ago, I did get a chance to speak with Senator Mark Warner, who is among those here at tonight's watch party. And again, really talking about what they're looking for with these late, or rather early votes, which may be coming in later in the night, and how that could help the party.
I actually still feel very good. The early vote came in at 1.2 million. That was, I think, extraordinary. And I'd point out to folks, that ability to vote early only came about because the General Assembly, under the Democrats, passed that expansion. And I think that benefits, frankly, both parties.
That was Senator Mark Warner, and again, out here back live, it seems like, again, not the same sort of mood that Jake is seeing right now at the Younkin campaign, and we'll see how that progresses as more of these votes come in throughout the evening. Working for you live in Northern Virginia, Cameron Thompson, CBS 6 News.
All right, thank you, Cam. And now we're going to go back to Chesterfield. And you've heard us talking about Chesterfield. It's always playing some kind of a role in whatever race, but especially the race for governor. Governor Northam won Chesterfield as a Democrat for the first time in a very long time, 4 years ago. President Biden won it last year. So we're told by the experts to look at Chesterfield to see how are the candidates doing. And as the results come in, that kind of tells us how the night is going to go.
And our Brendan King has been watching that county very closely for us this evening. He spoke with some voters earlier today, and he joins us now live with an update. Brendan?
Yeah, much quieter here in the suburbs of Chesterfield than those watch parties in Northern Virginia. The campaign signs, they're gone. The campaign workers, they're also gone and at home. But the good news for the poll workers who have literally been working overtime for months and months on this election here at Crenshaw Elementary School, they tell me they just finished up their job. But you may be wondering why we're here in Chesterfield County, the significance of this county. And like you mentioned, Bill, back in 2017, Chesterfield went blue for the first time since 1961. And fast forward 4 years, and the political pundits say, watch this space once again. So take a look at these numbers that we were able to tabulate. By 2 p.m. today, more than 54,000 people had voted. And if you add that to the early votes, there were 4,000 more votes than the entire vote total of that in Chesterfield in 2017. That's when Democrat Ralph Northam narrowly beat his Republican challenger Ed Gillespie by 700 votes in Chesterfield. At the time, the experts say that had been a sign that this county is changing. And I spoke to several voters today. One man told me he wanted to make sure he voted, and he encouraged his friends and family to do so. Listen to what other voters had to say.
You know, I am a first-generation immigrant, so I had to earn the right to vote, and I had to apply for citizenship to be able to vote, and so hopefully that means they will continue to exercise their rights to vote.
Having a say in my children's education. Taxes are high right now. Inflation, of course, is through the roof.
And I did hear education top of mind all day from many voters. Voters tell us this time around they really felt like both candidates from both teams, Democrats and Republicans, spoke directly to them, the suburban voters, the middle class, those who work and live in this county. The voters tell us that they believe that their vote was finally heard on this election day. Working for you in Chesterfield, I'm Brendan King, CBS 6 News.
All right, thank you, Brendan. And let's take a look now at the latest results in the big races, the big 3 statewide races. For governor, 84% of the hay is in the barn now, we're told. Glenn Younkin still leading, 54-46. That's about a margin of about 200,000 votes, again, with 84% in.
And the lieutenant governor's race, Winsome Sears still holding on to the lead with 54%. Hala Ayala, 46% of the votes.
And let's take a look at the Attorney General's race now. 84% in. Jason Miyares holding on to that 54-46 edge over Mark Herring, a margin of about 178,000 votes. And the casino vote.
63% of voters in Richmond saying no, and 37% voting yes, 41% of the precincts reporting right now.
And we're still watching them come in now, especially Richmond, and now putting some of their numbers in, so we'll expect to see some dramatic changes in the precincts. And I think we're going to go back to Washington. It's always a great night on election night because We get to connect with our old friend, Joseph St. George, and unlike the rest of us who might start to fatigue as the night goes on, Joe is just energized with every vote that comes in.
And Joe, Washington and the entire country is watching Virginia right now.
Yeah, and they're tweeting about it as well. Good evening, guys. Kevin McCarthy, who leads the Republicans in the House of Representatives, prematurely to some degree, already congratulating Glenn Younkin on Twitter, saying this is the start of many wins to come. The hashtag red wave is here. Now, that's what you're going to hear a lot if these numbers continue to hold. Red wave. That's what Republicans are going to say. A lot of Democrats nationwide, certainly here on Capitol Hill, perhaps President Biden. If Glenn Younkin is in the governor's mansion come tomorrow morning, they're going to start dismissing the Virginia race as not that important. But let's be honest. I mean, Vice President Kamala Harris, President Biden, they came to Virginia and made clear how important this election was to them. So even though they may dismiss this in the morning, it's a big deal nationwide. And it really is the first chance that voters in anywhere around the country in a purplish state like Virginia, and Virginia's back to being purple tonight if these numbers hold, it's the first contest in the Biden administration where we're actually seeing votes. It's not about polls. It's not about tweets. It's not about pundits on cable news. It's about actual votes. And what did we see? We saw rural voters so far tonight in a lot of counties across the Commonwealth vote in numbers greater than what they voted for Donald Trump last year. We saw numbers in suburbia shift dramatically towards Republicans. Chesterfield County is going to be ground zero for dissecting this election, a county in which Joe Biden won 365 days ago and one that Glenn Younkin is soundly winning tonight. Loudoun County up here in Northern Virginia. Yes, McAuliffe is leading there, but not nearly by the margin that his campaign would have liked. So what does this mean? Again, I think that's what matters to folks streaming us or popping on WTVR.com and catching some of our coverage is what does this mean going forward? Well, if these numbers hold, again, we keep stressing that word if, nothing's been called, it means that we may be having divided, we will be having divided government in Virginia. The state Senate is still in Democratic hands, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge for Republicans to navigate that. But you will start seeing Republicans pop up along with other conservative states and other Republican governors on challenges, for instance, to President Biden's executive orders or challenges in cases in front of the Supreme Court, whether it's involving the environment, climate change. You know, Virginia will be listed along there with Texas and Oklahoma and the Floridas of the world, again, if these numbers hold and Republicans sweep the major offices here. Just a dramatic night, Bill. Really the opposite of the last time you and I gathered on an election night like this in Virginia in 2013, Terry McAuliffe very much in a celebratory mood. The former Virginia governor not in a celebratory mood tonight, and I just got a message from someone at the Terry McAuliffe headquarters that they temporarily changed the channel, removing election coverage from the TV screen. That's a big sign, at least of something. So, guys, back to you.
Our viewers, anything about that? Stay with us because you never know. Things are still going on.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Well, we have some panelists with us tonight, John Reid and Gary Flowers. They've been talking with us throughout this election night about the things that matter to you, the voter, and we thank you again for being with us. We're getting later into the evening and we're starting to see some results. How are you both feeling over there about what we're seeing?
I'm feeling good, but I don't want to jinx it. I tell you, I've had a lot of election nights where at this hour, 9:47.
You have that kind of power? You could jinx things and make it all
I don't know, but I'm not gonna go out there and say that I feel like Republicans have this in the bag. And one of the things, Gary and I are sitting over here listening to your correspondence saying, now wait a minute, where are the absentee ballots? Are we sure that we know what numbers are actually in? You know, normally you'd look at a map of a specific county, Henrico or Chesterfield, and you'd say, okay, well, that's Eastern Henrico. That tends to be a Democrat. It's African American. We know that it's likely that that's going to go this way, and we know that Western Henrico, it's kind of split these days. But so many people voted absentee. Do we know where the ballots are? I feel like I'm kind of walking through a house with the blindfold on, and I'm waiting to find that door and open a separate room that I didn't know existed, which could throw all these numbers we're looking at into disarray.
Gary, how about you?
Well, I want to go back to one of the responders on the break, Councilman Mike Jones here in Richmond, with respect to the referendum on the proposed one casino project happens to be on this date in 1903. Mrs. Maggie Lena Walker opened her St. Luke Penny Savings Bank. She did so with the values and spirit of self-determination, of entrepreneurship, and of bold Black ownership. And that is what, in part, the casino represents. Not only economic development for the city of Richmond, not only $16 million to local nonprofit organizations, not only profit sharing for the workers, but the idea of Black ownership. It would seem to me that reasonable whites, particularly the wealthy elite who are supporting the opposition, would want Richmond and Virginia to boast of having the first Black-owned casino in America. And so, in many respects, it may come down to we the people being replaced by we the wealthy people. And that's going to have a deleterious impact on a Commonwealth that already has less than 1% ownership of state contracts for Black firms. And so in many ways, I think it's a racial issue.
Was it undersold as such? I mean, why was that not like a leading point then? If the elites, as you say, would want to take part in it, why wouldn't it be, if not branded, at least, you know, the second point that you hear about is, hey, this would be a great opportunity for.
I think that the idea of Black ownership frightens a lot of the wealthy in Richmond. And though they, in a football sense, though they fake left, they actually run right when it comes down to ownership. Symbolism like the statues and other things that have nothing to do with, or little to do with economics are supported. But economic change is repudiated. That's a position from the past that eerily reeks of Confederate ideology.
I got to tell you, who knows what we'll see, but I would think that a lot of the people who are voting for Terry McAuliffe, the rich whites in the city, are likely to have voted no on the casino, just like Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, former Richmond mayor, former governor of Virginia. I was kind of surprised.
Up to Seminary Avenue, you could see a lot of Terry McAuliffe signs side by side with all the no signs, too. So.
That was surprising to me, that group. Now, I had Alfred Liggins, who is the gentleman who's pushing the casino. He'll own it, his company. I mean, he's an established businessman, African-American, and he said on my program the other day, he thinks that a lot of liberal whites believe they are in a position to tell Black men and women where they should spend their money. I know better for you than you know.
That's a Confederate ideology.
But that may be Democrats, right? Not Republicans.
Well, let's remember the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, it's not the Ku Klux Klaner. It's not the white citizen counselor. It is the moderate whites that pose the biggest threat to the Negro people. And so in many ways, liberals who self-define themselves as such really aren't when it comes to economic issues for Black ownership. And I think that's what we may see tonight. Prayerfully, I'm wrong.
Well, it looks like with 41% still in that seems to be, I was looking for a more recent number than that, but it looks like that's the last number we've got. It's still 41%.
Still a lot of votes out there.
Against. Right, so it's
don't want to prejudge it.
More than half the vote out, and the yeses are about 6,000 votes behind, again with 59% it looks like to come in.
So we talked to Dr. Jatia Wrighton from VCU. She provided some insight, and one thing she mentioned was Princess Blanding with the Liberation Party and the effect that she had on this election. Did you agree? She said that 1% of the vote that she got likely took from Terry McAuliffe, and is why we're seeing.
No, this is not Black people's fault, and it's not people who supported Princess Blanding. Look at the map. You know, the map is pretty decisively red at this point. Black people have determined elections, as Governor Wilder so eloquently pointed out, from time immemorial, at least in the last 30 to 40 years in Virginia. And the 1%, the last time I saw that she has, didn't take away from Terry McAuliffe. I think at the end of the day, Terry McAuliffe is going to have to answer the question, to what extent did you reach out to the Black vote? And once again, to repeat my earlier statement, if you don't expect us, don't respect us.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, again for your input as always. And we're going to
walk over to the heat map
and make this thing crackle. We're going to see if we can do some more damage and figure out.
Dr. Bob, one thing I did want to ask, a point that our panelists brought up was that we're still waiting for absentee ballots to come in.
Well, that's exactly what I want to say. If you can put up the Virginia House numbers, particularly in these Henrico races that are very close, what I want to show is how in the Willett and Van Valkenburg, the Willett-Castleberg and Van Valkenburg-Holmes races, we got so much information still to come. So what's happened is that they have been reporting that we have 89% and 92% of the precincts have reported, right?
23,000 votes, 24,300
Let me just tell you, in both of those races, they have about 24,000 votes. 11 to 12,000 early votes have not been counted in both of those races. So rather than saying we really have 90% of the vote counted, we have 2/3 of the vote counted. There's 1/3 of the vote remaining. The early Adams race, very similar. What you would find there is that it looks like Adams is ahead by 2% there. There's 13,000 early votes that haven't been counted. A few more of them in Chesterfield County than in the city of Richmond. So that could change as well. So this notion of what votes have been counted and what votes haven't is odd, because here's the thing. The Henrico votes have been allocated to the gubernatorial candidates, the absentee votes, but they haven't allocated, at least up to now, the absentee votes to the House of Delegate candidates.
So they read one candidate's contribution on that ballot, but not the others.
Right, because because the governor's race is easy. You can just allocate it. But here you have to go into the absentee ballots and allocate it precinct by precinct.
That's right.
You have to go back to these districts and allocate them. So it's a little more complicated, and they haven't been allocated yet, and they're 1/3 of the vote.
Yeah.
In both of those in 3 races.
So what you're saying is we still have a lot of night ahead of us.
Yeah, to understand what's happening in the Richmond area in these critical House races, we're going to have to see these early votes get allocated before we know the answer. It's not 92% is not in.
So
maybe 92% of the precincts.
50% of the game is 90% mental or something? Because I thought we cleared this up last time. Remember, a year ago, we were waiting all night long for the early votes to come in, and there were 2.whatever million of them. And boy, we had to wait so long, and then that changed the whole tenor of the vote counting. And so people were irate because one candidate would have had a 10-point margin, and all of a sudden it's disappearing when the race was called for Senator Warner.
Right.
Cade, the number we had was a high number, like 60% reporting.
You mentioned that tonight.
Cade was ahead, by 10%.
I remember his response.
And all of a sudden the AP is calling it for Senator Warner.
Right.
People are like, what?
Well, all I can say is that these House races are up in the air right now because we have to wait to see these early votes come in. And they could have a dramatic impact because if the Republicans are trying to get 6 seats, they've been looking at these 3 seats in the Richmond area and saying maybe we count them, but you can't count them yet because we have to wait for the early vote.
The State
and look, and as more of that obviously is coming in, all of a sudden we're seeing a change. We're seeing Willett go ahead, we're seeing Adams go ahead, and Van Valkenburg went ahead. So all of a sudden, there. Now, we still don't know where they're coming from, but reality is that is what is now happening. These early votes are coming in. Remember, just a minute ago, we had 24,000 votes counted.
And it wasn't changing.
Now that we have 36,000 votes counted, it looks like Van Valkenburg is now going to win that race.
Well, and interestingly, you had said it seemed as if the numbers for some of the House races had frozen for half an hour.
It did.
And in a way, it's almost like, well, guess what? We're getting ready for this big dump, and we're going to finally I mean, it just seems kind of crazy, though, that it could be jurisdiction by jurisdiction, that there wasn't a uniform rule for, hey, this is what you're going to do with your early votes. This is what you're going to do with your absentees. And of course, some absentees can still be counted as late as Friday if they're postmarked by today. But even so, it just seems crazy that.
Well, here's the point. We've never had these House races with all of this early vote before.
So does that mean, with all the confusion that, you know, as voters are watching these numbers, does that mean it's time to go back and maybe look at how we do this in the future?
I hope so, yeah. I mean, I think it's a learning process. It's an evolving process for these local government officials and the registrars. I mean, and they work really hard. I don't want to cast any aspersions on them, because I think Virginia has a good electoral system. I think it has the highest integrity. I'm really positive about that. But this is what you have now seen, that as this early vote has come in, it's changing. Now, here's the Adams early issue, is that the early vote's coming from two different jurisdictions.
Right.
You have Richmond and Chesterfield. And Early was running better in Chesterfield than he was in Richmond. There was more early vote for Early in Chesterfield. So we'll have to see what happens as that goes on, because this is still a pretty close race with only 76% reporting. But it does appear that the early vote has really helped the two Democratic candidates in Henrico hold on to their seats. Willett looks, he's not in yet. There's still 84% reporting, but he has finally taken a lead for the first time, I think, all evening. And Van Valkenburg has taken an even bigger lead with 96% reporting. So he looks pretty good. We can't make a decision on Willett Castleberg yet, and we're certainly not going to make one on Adams Early yet.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Bob. We're going to go.
That clarified something.
Yeah,
no, it did. We're so happy that
clear
you're
as mud, I think we can say. We clarified it. It's thick and, yeah, muddy.
All right. So again, as these results continue to come in, we'll continue to watch them. We'll continue to do our best to break them down. We have crews staged outside of the Richmond Registrar's office. Our Leland Pinder joins us now. Leland?
Yeah, hey there, Candace. I'm going to step out the way while we have some activity happening. You can see there's a car parked there right now. It's about to pull off, but we've been seeing a steady stream of vehicles come and go here at the Registrar's office. And what's happening is poll workers from across the entire city, of course, the polls are closed now. They've been bringing those poll books here to headquarters to turn them in as those votes continue to be tallied and counted. Also here at the Registrar's office, there are several Richmond City police officers on hand, kind of watching over things, keeping folks protected who are working, and just making sure nothing, nothing goes wrong here. Or if anyone was to come and try to cause some trouble, they wouldn't get very far. But we came here to the Registrar's office tonight because earlier this evening there was a bit of a delay in results reporting for the city of Richmond that we noticed, but no explanation as to why. Now, about 9 o'clock, about exactly an hour ago, those numbers did start to come in, so that's great. You've been seeing results for races in the city and across the area on the ticker on your screen. Of course, you all have been doing reporting and analysis as well on air. But again, it was good to see those results come in, but still no explanation as to what caused the delay. So we do hope to get that answered before we leave here tonight. We've been told the registrar is currently here at work, inputting numbers and meeting with staff, so we'll be on top of that just as soon as we can. But did want to update you on one thing that I've been following tonight, and that is the vote on the one casino and resort here in Richmond. And at this time, it's not looking good. It looks like Richmonders at this point, at last check, about 56 of 72 precincts having their results reported, Richmonders don't want to see the casino in town. Now, I am by no means calling a race. That's not what I do. Of course, I'm just reporting what the numbers look like at this moment. And I want to just make sure I give them to you exactly. So according to the state's election website here, 19,049 people voting yes for the casino. That's about 43% of voters, but 25,124 voters voting no. That works out to be about 57%. So roughly it's about 60-40 right now, no for one casino and resort. Now again, that is 56 of 72 precincts reporting, so we're not at 100%, and who knows, things could change, but that's how it's looking right now. Live at the Registrar's office in the city of Richmond, Leland Pender, back to you guys.
All right, thank you for that update, Leland. Let's take a look now at some of the big races, the big three statewide races. The race for governor, 88% of the precincts reporting. It is 53-46. Glenn Younkin over Terry McAuliffe. That is a difference of about 173,000 votes. And the race for lieutenant governor, 88% reporting. Winsome Sears leading 53-47 over Hala Ayala. That's a difference of about 160,000 votes. And the race for attorney general, with 87% of the precincts reporting, Jason Miara still leading Mark Herring 53-47. That is a difference of 140,000 votes. Again, with 87% reporting so far. We're going to take a quick break. You've been watching our streaming live coverage of tonight's 2011 elections. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And thank you once again for rejoining us. You're watching our live streaming channel for continuous election coverage in this 2021 election night. I'm Bill Fitzgerald.
I'm so glad you're with us. I'm Candace Burns. We have team coverage for you, teams of reporters and experts joining us tonight to break down all of the results and all of the issues that matter to you, the voters. We're watching them closely. Here to break down the Virginia governor's race and why it matters nationally is our Capitol insider, Joe St. George. We've been checking in with him all night.
Yes, good to see you again, Joseph. So tell us what's going on up there.
Well, you know, a lot of Democrats nationwide are going to have to explain themselves in the morning if these numbers in Virginia hold as to, okay, what has to change over the course of the next 365 days to prevent a true red wave from not just sweeping Virginia. We seem to be en route to a red wave in Virginia if these numbers hold. But nationally, President Biden, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Senator Schumer, they're going to have to ask themselves, is there anything that can be changed in the next 12 months to prevent a red wave from sweeping over Congress in the 2022 midterm elections? We talked about this earlier. You're going to hear a lot of Democrats from outside Virginia say that the Virginia race isn't that important, but that's the exact opposite of what they were saying 24 hours ago. It's why former President Barack Obama held a rally in Central Virginia. It's why President Biden campaigned there multiple times for Terry McAuliffe, who we're keeping an eye on Democratic HQ, Terry McAuliffe HQ. CNN Jeff Zeleny just tweeting out his sources telling him that Terry McAuliffe is en route and is expected to address his supporters in 10 minutes or so. So we'll keep an eye on that. Of course, we're all looking at these numbers very closely, and what we're seeing is a shift. A shift we've talked about a lot tonight. Dr. Bob, the best in Virginia politics, breaking this down, has helped us understand the importance of Chesterfield. I want to talk about a county we don't usually talk about, Bill. How about Goochland County, right? 4 years ago, Goochland County, about 6,500 or so votes for Ed Gillespie. Tonight, over 8,800 votes. Yes, it's a smaller county. Goochland doesn't get a ton of attention on election nights like that. But you saw that that's a 2,000 vote pickup in one county for Republicans, for Glenn Younkin. And he replicated that across a lot of rural Virginia tonight, offsetting high Democratic voting areas such as the city of Richmond, such as Fairfax County up north. So a lot of spin is about to begin following this result, if and when we get a concession or a projection. But as of now, it remains a good night to be a Republican.
And Joe, everybody's talking about next year's congressional elections, the off-year elections, taking this night as a harbinger perhaps, or things that have to change if the Democrats are going to have a different result than they appear to be getting tonight. But in 2 years, we'll have Senate elections along with the House elections again. So in a sense, there's a lot that's going to be happening here in Virginia just within the state.
And really, you know, Bill, sometimes we in Washington sometimes overread some things. I think if you really watched and followed the Glenn Younkin campaign very closely, he focused a lot on hyper-local issues, right? Focused on grocery taxes, focused on school boards. He attempted to really localize this election. So what does that perhaps tell me, as someone who watches this for a living, is that you're going to see a lot of focus on education and schools, perhaps heading into the 2022 midterms. But we shall see. People watching, streaming us at home on WTVR.com right now, or one of our other sources, ask yourself, how did you vote? What drove you to the polls? Was it the economy? Was it the pandemic? Was it Washington, D.C. policies? Was it what happened with your child in their school district? That is going to be the dissection, the autopsy, if you will, of this election, to see what went wrong for Democrats and what went right for Republicans.
All right, Joe, we thank you for your insights as always. We're going to check back in now with our team in Northern Virginia. Our Cameron Thompson is with the McAuliffe campaign. And Cam, we're hearing that the former governor may be coming out to speak in just a few moments.
Yeah, I just got one quick more update from one of his staff members, and they are saying roughly, as Joe was saying there, a 10-minute window at this point where we are expecting the Democratic candidate, former Governor Terry McAuliffe, to come out to address the crowd. As you can see, grown behind me, they've sort of started to trickle in from around the hotel where they're now gathering in front of the podium. I tried to ask what sort of comments he was going to make, and they wouldn't share any additional details other than he should be coming out and making some remarks. Of course, if you're going to be gauging off of how the people I've been talking to this evening have been feeling, it might be sort of a message of let's wait and see what's going to happen with these early voting results. You heard Dr. Bob talking about that, the impact it could have. Of course, a lot of people have sort of been hitting refresh, trying to see in some of these key areas, like such as Fairfax County, if they're going to be coming in enough to potentially sway this. But one person I was talking to sort of did the biting of the fingernails miming, just in terms of the nervousness that they are feeling tonight, not only for being able to maintain their grip on the big three offices of governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, but also whether or not the House will stay in control of the Democrats. Speaking with Senator Mark Warner tonight, and as well as State Senator Jennifer McClellan, all sort of pointing to those early voting numbers, and if that could help them out at the end of the night. Warner recalling how things worked out in his favor last year. I know Dr. Bob was talking about this, where it was called very early on for him, but it wasn't until about 10:30, 11 o'clock when the votes actually started going in his favor. And as you can see behind me, people are gathered. They are expressing nervousness. You heard Jake throughout the night, and you can hear the cheers coming in every time they're throwing up the results on the television screens here. It's only been one cheer to my recollection since the polls have closed, and that was very early on. Since then, people sort of just watching the results come in slowly and silently, or checking them on their phones. And again, waiting here in Northern Virginia to hear from the Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe to address his supporters tonight. We'll wait and see what he has to say. Working for you in Northern Virginia, Cameron Thompson, CBS 6 News.
All right, thanks, Cam. As we wait for McAuliffe to address his supporters, let's go back to our panelists, John Reid and Gary Flowers. Gary, I want to start with you. We just heard from Cam. He's at the McAuliffe camp. A lot of people there still saying, hey, we have to wait for these absentee ballots to be counted. Let's be patient. What do you think we're about to hear from Mr. McAuliffe?
I can't speculate there, but it's not over until it's over. And whatever he says, this evening is a forerunner to perhaps what we may see on the national level in other races. And toward that end, the Democratic Party is going to have to answer questions if this pattern continues as to why didn't the campaign of McAuliffe reach all bases. We have the World Series on tonight as we compete. Did they touch all bases? Or did they assume that this perhaps would be a coronation?
We spoke to former Governor Douglas Wilder. He said that the community, the Black community, was really looking to hear from the candidates, come and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do for you, make that personal connection. He said that was missing this time around. Do you agree?
Absolutely. In fact, Reverend Jesse Jackson and Congresswoman Maxine Waters were on the Gary Flowers show this morning. And Reverend Jackson said he reached out to former Governor McAuliffe with no response. To leave out the most formidable political figure in the last 50 years, and perhaps the first Black governor of Virginia, is not a calculation for victory.
And John, what do you think about tonight? What's your takeaway as you sort of see the numbers solidifying for the governor, for the potential next governor, Glenn Younkin? Does it matter that some people might feel like they're left out of that coalition? Because it sounds like Mr. Younkin has a winning coalition if these numbers hold up.
Yeah, I think Glenn Younkin had to make sure that every voter out there felt like they would be welcome at the table in front of him. We'll see where the minority vote went as you start to parse it, where Asians went, where Latinos went. There are a lot of Latinos up in Northern Virginia who are voting. Did they embrace Younkin? Did they feel like this was a candidate who would give them a fair shake? Did some Black voters take offense? I mean, I had Governor Wilder on my show, and he told me that Terry McAuliffe never called him back after he got the nomination. I was a little surprised by that. So I can imagine that some people would be offended. But did they go to Younkin, or did they stay home? I don't know.
It's yet to be seen.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is going to be to that. But I think Glenn Younkin presented himself, and we were talking during one of the commercial breaks, as a former basketball player, as an athlete. Maybe he was able to present himself as an affable guy, an open-minded guy, in a way that a career politician who pounds his fist on the podium and says, I believe this and I believe that, and is pretty strong about his opinions, that might drive people away. And Glenn Younkin was able to stay above some of the rhetoric.
But in politics, it's not about your demeanor as much as it's about your deeds.
Should be, yeah.
Making money off of victims on Wall Street is nothing to hang your head on. politically. Citizens United case some 8 years ago allowed the proliferation of untold money into political campaigns. I think America is best served when we do not allow elected officials to get into office based on personal wealth, but policy positions.
Well, talk to Terry McAuliffe about the money thing, because he's the guy who knows where all the Democrat money is.
We've long had self-financing political figures, and we're gonna have to pause right here because we are going to clear the way to carry Mr. McAuliffe's statement on our air. So.
Breaking news in our election coverage right now, we are hearing that former Governor Terry McAuliffe, who is running for the Democratic or for governor in Virginia, is about to take the podium right now and address his supporters. That's right. He is trailing 52 to 47 with 90% in. Let's listen in now.
I want to thank our great Governor Ralph Northam and Pam Northam for the great work that they have done. So we still got a lot of votes to count. We got about 18% of the vote out, so we're going to continue to count the votes because every single Virginian deserves to have their vote counted. Let me first of all, I want to thank everybody here with us tonight. It has been a great campaign. I started this campaign 328 days ago. I have done an average of 7 to 10 events a day for the last 328 days. And it was great to be out here. And we opened up this campaign when I kicked off this campaign down in Richmond with my great co-chairs, LeVar Stoney and Louise Lucas and Charnel Herring, to talk about how we needed to rebuild all of our schools here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and raise teacher pay and get every child access to a pre-K education and to get everybody access to broadband here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we have continued to take that fight throughout this Commonwealth. But first of all, I want to thank my family. I want to start by thanking my wife, Dorothy. As you know, she has been a champion, a true policy expert. And through her efforts, as you know, 13 million more meals served to needy children here in the Commonwealth. And I want to thank my family. You know, you don't get to pick your parents, as you know. You're born into family, and they have survived campaign after campaign. And I want to thank Dory, who is here with me tonight, with her fiance, Nick, who's here with us tonight. Jack McAuliffe, who is here with his fiancée, Shannon, tonight. Sally McAuliffe. And Peter McAuliffe. So let's count all these votes, but let me thank each and every one of you over the course of the last 11 months for the doors that you've knocked on, the phone calls that you made. Just last weekend, 450,000 doors knocked on, 2 million during the course of this campaign. I want to thank you. The McAuliffe family loves each and every one of you. Thank you for what you've done for this campaign. And I want to thank my campaign staff. It was the greatest campaign staff ever assembled, and give them a great round of applause for all the great work they have done. But folks, as I said long ago, this is a different state. When Ralph and I were elected 8 years ago, we have made our state open and welcoming, but the fight continues. We got to make sure we protect women's right to choose here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We got to make sure everybody gets quality, affordable health care here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Everybody's entitled to a world-class education here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we are going to continue that fight tonight and every day going forward. So I just want to thank all of you for what you have meant to us. I look around this room and I see so many friends we've worked with for many years. This is a different state. We are the greatest state in the United States of America, and it's because of you. Thank you. God bless you. And let's go on and forward. Thank you.
You've been listening to Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe speaking to his supporters, not conceding. He is losing at this point 52 to 47%, with about 90% of the precincts reporting thus far. But he said he's going to wait until every vote is counted, and that could be as many as 300,000 more votes out there, because we're still trying to figure out just how many early votes have not yet been released, to say nothing of the absentee ballots. But again, Terry McAuliffe not conceding just yet. We are now going to continue our coverage on our streaming channel. We hope you join us there. In the meantime, we'll take you back to regular programming.
Welcome back, and thanks for sticking with us. We are going to go now to our Jake Burns, who is in Northern Virginia. He is with the Younkin campaign. Jake, we know that there's a lot of excitement building as we continue this night, because Younkin has been holding that lead for a very long time.
Did not concede. That did not appear to be the case whenever he put him up here on the screen back behind me. Everyone can see his speech happening about 30 minutes away from here. And as soon as that happened, there were big cheers coming from the crowd. You can see this place is absolutely packed with Republicans excited about this. Appears to be win for the Virginia GOP the first time since 2009. You can see how excited folks are. A lot of people.
All right, well, we're trying to get that signal clarified with Jake right now. Obviously, in a live situation, you've got a lot of cell phones up there, and that's essentially how we're connecting with Jake. So we'll try to check back in with him, but you can see a lot of exuberant people there, a lot of signs being held up, the crowd there getting extremely excited. We're understanding that Mr. Younkin may come out to speak. We're not exactly sure. We've not been given an exact time warning, but he is expected to speak at some point in the next 30 minutes or so. And of course, we'll keep watching that and staying in touch with Jake. In the meantime, we're going to go back to our map so that we can sort of crunch some of these numbers and see what's happening. Last time we were talking about these particular House races that were suddenly breaking in a different way than we had thought, Bob.
And we just heard from McAuliffe, who is not conceding at this moment. He's telling us to hold off. There's still votes to be counted.
Right. If you see what the, this is the race, as we said, was certainly going to narrow as these votes came in from Richmond and Northern Virginia, and you've seen that. It's now a 117,000 vote margin, not a 200,000 vote margin there. And there's still votes to come. So Terry McAuliffe probably hoping against hope that this could even get even a little closer as time goes on this evening, and maybe that there's still some mail votes to come in, and that will be helpful for him. But still, it's an uphill climb, and I think most everyone thinks that the speech he gave was a thank you to all of his supporters without absolutely conceding. And that's probably the last we're going to hear from Terry McAuliffe, that if Glenn Younkin wins this evening, at some point Terry McAuliffe would probably call him, and it would be Younkin who would tell us that he received a call from McAuliffe. But I don't think we're going to hear from him again unless all of a sudden this 117,000 becomes much, much narrower. Interestingly, if you could put up the Herring vote there, the difference there now is 83,000. And so that has gotten a little closer because you don't have that third-party candidate in the race there.
And yet still, as you look at that, the difference, it would seem that people are in fact splitting their vote.
A little bit of splitting the vote, but I think what you're also seeing there is the Princess Blanding vote is now having to go down and pick someone for attorney general and pick someone for lieutenant governor. So my guess is that Herring is probably doing better than my heirs with the Princess Blanding vote. That's what I would see there.
I see, because the numbers are staying fairly steady for the Ayala-Sears race, but again, maybe some of that peeling off as well for Ayala.
Yeah, again, you see, that's about 100,000 votes. And there may be some sense that Herring had as a two-term attorney general, may have had a constituency in Northern Virginia, perhaps, that was supporting him, even though they may have switched over to Younkin. But clearly not enough, at least at the moment there.
All right, let's see if we can get up some of these House races. In the 68th, that straddles sort of a little bit of Chesterfield and a little bit of Richmond, and it looks like Adams has increased her lead as some of those early votes now have been tallied.
Right, and the question is, where are they from? That there was more early votes still to count in Chesterfield than in Richmond, but now there is almost a 3,000 vote difference. And Early's going to have to win a large majority of those Chesterfield early votes if he's going to be able to knock off Dawn Adams.
Yeah, because it does seem like the Richmond votes are starting to trickle in or maybe gush in at this point. And here's one that appears to have been called already, Van Valkenburg holding his seat.
Well, he won because of the early vote. Obviously, the Republican Christopher Holmes got momentum late in the race. He did very well on the in-person vote. And what we saw was that when all of a sudden the early vote and the mail vote got counted, that leaned Democratic, and Van Valkenburg was able to keep his seat. This is the guy who raised over $1 million to keep this seat. And he is one of the hardest workers imaginable. He's out there all the time with his constituents. He knocks on a lot of doors, and that would have been a big shock to the Democrats if he had been knocked off.
All right, and then here's another one that we've featured a lot in our coverage, tightly contested again in Henrico, Willett Castleberg, and again with those early votes being tallied, Willett looks like he's poised to hold on to his seat. But
he has a 1,400 vote margin, ahead by 4 points. Certainly, I think there's some early vote left. If they're in heavily Castleberg precincts, maybe. But she came up just short last time, and if things stay as they are, she's going to come up just short again. This was a race, Bill, in which for an $18,000 job, it was between $2 and $3 million were spent for this particular race alone. I mean, if you just watching CBS 6, sometimes you thought they were running for statewide office. They were on television so much.
I know, and we also saw that in the governor's race as well. That kind of crazy money.
Take a look at the House altogether and see what's changed, because it looks like the numbers have changed a bit since the last time we looked at this map. So are you thinking now that we're starting to see some of the absentee ballots being counted, do you think that, how's the balance in your mind?
Well, look at this. So right now in the called seats, 32 Republicans, 21 Democrats. Those were the seats that were really not that competitive. Now we're talking about 47 undecided seats. The Republicans need 6 seats to have the majority. They're close as I'm looking at this. But what I'm seeing is, again, a set of races in which the early votes have yet to be fully counted, and they're going to ultimately decide what happens here. It does appear, particularly in the Virginia Beach area, that and the Hampton Roads area, Republicans are doing very well there. They're doing better there than they did in Richmond Metropolitan, where all of a sudden the Democrats were able to hold on. It looks for certainly one of the Western Henrico seats, maybe the other. That's not been the case in Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area, Newport News area, and in fact, there has been one really large upset of Martha Mugler, who almost no one thought was going to get beat, and she now seems to have been beaten.
Now you're testing my skills, but what district would she be in?
I don't know the name. I think it's the Newport News district.
See, they're all numbers. They need names on it. But we're mastering the folks technology.
I'll get you that number.
We're getting fluent at it.
But what we've seen is that Glenn Younkin ran well in Hampton Roads, and the Republicans have made some real inroads in the House in Hampton Roads. The Democrats kept most, but not all, of the seats they were trying to hang on to in Northern Virginia. It looks like they're going to have a pretty decent night in the Richmond metropolitan area, but down in Hampton Roads, big trouble for the Democrats.
And let's see some of those numbers. Norfolk, Chesapeake, yeah. So Younkin will prevail there. Isle of Wight.
What was the Chesapeake number?
That was 5842 with 88%.
Let me tell you,
7,500.
if that number stays up, that's huge. This is a place where the Democrats were winning 51, 52%. I thought that Younkin was going to carry Chesapeake, but carry it by 16 points, a lot. How about Virginia Beach? What do we have there?
Now you're testing my geography, are you?
And go all the way down.
Let's just go through them all.
Yeah, hold on a second.
We'll find it and we'll come back to the heat map because we have our Joe St. George. He's standing by live in the nation's capital. He's been listening to all of this. He also got a chance to hear from McAuliffe as he addressed his supporters. Joe, what did you take away from what McAuliffe said tonight?
It was a jolly, we know we are down, but we're not conceding yet address. Terry McAuliffe is a veteran of American politics. He's been on the right side of election nights during his years as a close aide and fundraiser to former President Bill Clinton. He's been on the wrong side of election nights through his close friendship with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton over the years. So to some degree, he's a professional politico. And if you stick around politics long enough, you realize that some nights are yours and some nights are not yours. And at the very moment, it's not the night for Democrats. Republicans are leading as we await to hear from Glenn Younkin and Republicans. Hard to see him not declaring a version of victory in his speech, although we've yet to have a concession. Important to note, Terry McAuliffe stressing all votes need to be counted. That has been really the mantra of the Democratic Party for several years now, so no surprise that the former Virginia governor would say that on what is a very difficult night for his career, no doubt. To put all that time, all that money, all that energy for so many weeks in what has been a relatively unprecedented campaign because of the pandemic and COVID. You had to campaign differently. You had to fundraise via Zoom instead of interacting with people. It was a bit different, but emotional nonetheless. You were mentioning Virginia Beach, right? And I actually pulled it up on my heat map here. Glenn Younkin, 59% right now with 67% reporting. So we've still got a bit of the way to go there. But with Glenn Younkin, 59% in Virginia Beach, I'm just comparing that to 2017 when Ralph Northam carried Virginia Beach. So you see a big flip and a big population center in the Commonwealth of Virginia. One of the many reasons why it is a good night to be a Republican. And look, we should note that Virginia is back to this purplish status now. It lost its purplish status for a few years after a few cycles of a Democratic wave across the Commonwealth. It's squarely in that category again. And you know, Bill and Candace and Dr. Bob, this is what Americans tend to do, certainly in purplish states like Virginia, is we have swings from one to another, that pendulum, right? It swings back and forth. And for a while, it was swinging in the direction of the Democratic Party. Democrats passed a lot of their priorities over the course of the last several years. But tonight, if these numbers hold, we're seeing a pendulum swing back to Republicans. To some degree, it's a story as old as time, the flipping of seats, the flipping of power in Richmond between Democrats and Republicans.
All right, John, I want you to know we have found Virginia Beach is actually on the ocean. Who knew? So we clarified that. Thank you for your insights as always. We always look forward to hearing from Joe. We are still monitoring whether or not Mr. Younkin is going to come out and speak. We heard that he is. It's a question of when. So we will be monitoring that. But in the meantime, we're going to get you caught up on some of the big races. Obviously, the biggest being the governor's race, where Younkin is maintaining a 52 to 48% lead with 92% of the votes counted thus far.
And here's another look at the lieutenant governor's race. Winsome Sears still holding on to that lead with 52% of the vote. Hala Ayala with 48% right now, 92% of the precincts reporting.
And again with 92% in Miaras. Jason Miaras hanging on to a 51-49% lead over Mark Herring. We're going to take a quick break. And again, we're going to monitor if Mr. Younkin comes out to speak. We'll jump back in. In the meantime, you're watching our streaming special election coverage of the 2021 elections.
CBS 6 News at 11 starts now. Working for you. CBS 6 News at 11 starts now.
It's election night in Virginia, and while the results are still coming in, it looks like a Republican sweep of statewide offices. Good evening, I'm Bill Fitzgerald.
I'm Candace Burns. We have crews across the Commonwealth tonight covering the big races and the issues that matter to you, from problems at the polls to a controversial casino vote in Richmond. We start tonight with our Jake Burns. He attended a watch party tonight for Republican candidate for governor Glenn Younkin. Jake, I'm sure a lot of energy where you are right now.
Oh my gosh, Candace, so much energy. It's kind of hard to quantify, really, unless you take a look at it. This is actually a kind of muted situation compared to what we saw earlier today, because it does appear, despite the fact that votes are still being counted, Republican Glenn Younkin will end the streak of Republicans losing statewide races every single year since 2009. You can see in here there are a bunch of people. This place is actually thinned out a little bit since maybe 15 to 20 minutes ago. People dancing, listening to music, and excited about a candidate that they feel is the right person for the job and feel was the right person for this race. Younkin, a former basically ran a campaign focused on taxes and also education, specifically some high-profile parental grievances at school boards over mask mandates and what's being taught in public school curriculum. That is what carried the day for Younkin, it does appear, winning in the suburban areas, or at least doing a better job than many Republicans had in years past. He did well in Chesterfield. He did well in Virginia Beach, a place that he told us earlier in the day he expected to do well because that's where he was from. Now, the Republican Party of Virginia somewhat sees this as a reset. I spoke with Rich Anderson, who is the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. He says this is a reset for Virginia Republicans. Former Governor Jim Gilmore had a different take on this. Take a listen to them.
I think what that says is the party, as any party does, in order to remain relevant, retools itself from time to time. And it brings new and fresh blood with vision on board, and the people will respond to that. And I think that's what's happened in this case.
He hasn't said anything radical or done anything radical. They're not taking the bait when he's been lured into trying to do improper things. He hadn't done any of that. He has stayed statesmanlike, and I think that's made a big difference. Particularly since I think people are rejecting the radicalism of the Democrats.
The former Governor Jim Gilmore speaking there about Mr. Younkin. Now, a few moments ago, podium back here behind me, that they were still looking at the early votes coming in. They were still waiting until every vote was counted, something that we heard 30 minutes away from here in Northern Virginia from someone you're about to hear from in just a second. But we do not know if Mr. Younkin will speak to right on WTVR.com. But for now, working for you at a jubilant watch party here in Chantilly, Jake Burns, CBS 6 News.
All right, thank you, Jake. And let's take a look at the results now for the race for governor, with 93% of the precincts reporting so far. Glenn Younkin holding on to a 51% to 49% lead over Terry McAuliffe. That's a difference of about 65,000 votes or so, give or take. And the Democratic candidate for governor, Terry McAuliffe, held a watch party tonight in Northern Virginia as well.
Our Cameron Thompson is there tonight, and he joins us now. Cam, what's the mood like where you are?
Well, Bill and Candace, a lot less energy than you could hear from Jake's watch party for the Younkin campaign, as we did hear from Terry McAuliffe about 30 minutes ago, and since then the room really has emptied, as we've been told that that's the last we are going to hear from Terry McAuliffe for tonight. And his big message tonight was not a concession speech, but a let's wait and see speech. Is again the message that we've been hearing all night from the Democratic surrogates, is that they were really banking on seeing these early early vote totals, if they could close the gap that we have been seeing shrink a little bit since the earlier in the night. And talking as well to the Speaker of the House of Delegates, Eileen Fillercorn, and they're saying that, you know, the Democratic candidates for the House and for the Big Three ran a good campaign, talking about the progress that they had made in the last 8 years since McAuliffe was last governor, and the General Assembly going for the Democrats over the past 2 years, but talking with some of the supporters who came out having a little less certainty than the wait-and-see approach that we're hearing from McAuliffe and Fillercorn, waiting for all the results to come in, and talking to a few individuals about what their takeaways were from this campaign that saw a much larger margin for McAuliffe at the start and had come down to it neck and neck in the final days and weeks of the campaign, and sort of giving a tip of the hat to the campaign that was run by Glenn Younkin and the Republicans. And they're saying that he kept the issues that he talked about focused more about statewide issues, about education issues. He talked about what was going on in Loudoun County, like Jake had been talking about, while as McAuliffe and the Democrats really tried to make it a national campaign, bringing in former President Donald Trump and trying to attach him to Younkin, and as well what was going down in Texas with the abortion laws there, and saying that maybe that the local issues is what appealed more to voters and maybe something that needs to be taken note of for the midterm elections next year. And then again, as I mentioned, McAuliffe addressing the crowd a short time ago and telling them he's not giving up yet and that he's waiting for these results to come in, as he's saying that every vote will count in this election.
Folks, if I said long ago, this is a different state. When Ralph and I were elected 8 years ago, we have made our state open and welcoming, but the fight continues. We got to make sure we protect women's right to choose here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We got to make sure everybody gets quality, affordable health care here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Everybody's entitled to a world-class education here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we are going to continue that fight tonight and every day going forward.
And again, here back at the McAuliffe Watch Party, things starting to break down. McAuliffe's people telling me that that is the only time we are going to hear from the former governor tonight, and that they are waiting to see how the early vote comes back and more results coming in tonight and how things are shaking up, and they'll reassess in the morning and let us know when we may hear from them again. Working for you in Northern Virginia, Cameron Thompson, CBS 6 News.
Thanks, Cam. And to give you a better idea of how the races are shaping up here in Virginia and what that really looks like, we want to introduce you to our new interactive heat map. You can see here how the localities voted. You see a lot of red here on this map of Virginia. Glenn Younkin leading right now, 51% of the votes. McAuliffe, 49%. We can also look at the lieutenant governor's race here. Still much of the same. A lot of red on this map. Winsome Sears with 51% of voter support. Hala Ayala, 49%. And let's take a look at the AG's race. Jason Miaris with 51%, Mark Herring 49% right now, 94% of precincts reporting in all of these races. A lot of red here. And take a look at the Virginia House of Delegates. All 100 seats here were up for grabs tonight. Before election night, Democrats had power in the House. Yet to see, still votes are being counted, so we still have to wait to see what happens with these races, but we'll keep a close eye, watching closely.
And we're seeing some strong reactions to the results on both sides on social media. Let's take a look at some of the comments from our Facebook page. Lesney Kitchen feeling good about Younkin's numbers so far, saying yes, red all the way, bye-bye blue. Tammy Reagan feels the same way. She says, praying Virginia and America need a red wave. Meanwhile, Michael Brokenburr says he is hoping McAuliffe pulls through, commenting his lead is getting chipped away as the vote counts come in from the suburbs. Once again, we'll look at the top three statewide office vote totals so far. 51-49, Younkin over McAuliffe with 93% of the vote count in. And the lieutenant governor's race is also on the screen there. That we could pull that one up. It's similar numbers there, about 51-49 with 94% of the vote tallied so far. And in the AG's race, again, everything is 51-49 so far with 94% of the vote tallied. And take a look at this. If you lived in Richmond, you had a chance to vote on a proposal for a casino. That was a referendum on the ballot tonight. It is 51-49, tight as it could be, with 99% of the precincts reporting. We do not know in all these cases just how many early ballots are yet to be counted or some of the absentee ballots. But again, so far, these are the numbers that we have tonight, 51-49 against the casino proposal. And our Leland Pinder has been following that casino vote all night.
Leland joins us now live outside of the Richmond Registrar's office.
Yeah, that's right, Candace and Bill. Here in Richmond, it is a very close vote, as you talked about, Bill, there. Just about 2,200 roughly votes separating the yeses and the nos, with the nos leading, of course, saying they do not want to see a casino here in the city of Richmond. Now, as you also mentioned, 99% of precincts reporting, 71 of 72 to be exact. And talking with my colleague, Melissa Hippolyte, who's been talking with some elections officials here in the city, they mentioned those mailed-in and absentee ballots that could still be counted as long as they're postmarked by Election Day, and those votes could still come in over the next few days. So with that last precinct that has not reported, we may not know those numbers for the next few days, and that could make a difference possibly, as you mentioned, just how close this vote on the casino is. Now, of course, the casino is a $600 million proposal for that big project in South Richmond. And of course, we will continue to monitor these numbers and bring you the latest as the information comes in. Bill and Candace.
Thank you very much, Leland. A majority of Virginians opted to vote in person today. So what was it like at the polls, and were there any problems?
Our Shannon Lilly has the latest information from the State Department of Elections. Shannon, what have you found out?
Well, Bill, in a briefing that just wrapped up, the State Department of Elections describes an incredibly smooth election day with really just a few minor hiccups. Meanwhile, over in Chesterfield, we spoke with some people who had a different experience.
Less than an hour before polls close, a long line runs out the door at the Lifelong Learning Center in Chesterfield, one of 2 polling locations in the county election officials say ran out of ballots on Election Day.
When we finally got to the front of the line, we saw that a policeman or sheriff arrived with a box of ballots, and they were all cheering.
David Livingston and his family upset after he says they waited an hour and a half just for his ballot not to be scanned but placed in a box to be counted later.
Well, we're mad, obviously, because this seems like a lot more trouble, a lot more wait than any election I've ever voted in before.
And for volunteer poll worker Kendall Wallace.
So it was hard to watch. Most people can't wait those lines. And so we've had a lot of people leave today that didn't get to vote.
But in a State Board of Elections briefing Tuesday evening, Department of Elections Commissioner Chris Piper describes a successful day.
But overall, the election today was about as smooth as we could have asked for.
But he does say due to heavy voter turnout, there were several localities reporting ballot shortages, including in Appomattox, Floyd, Powhatan, Madison, Albemarle, and in Chesterfield, where he says some ballots may need to be hand counted. But he says voting here continued.
The report that I have currently is that election officers were instructed to have voters cast ballots on the ballot marking devices in the polling places. That voting went on uninterrupted.
His message on the integrity of this election.
We do everything we can to ensure that voters have equal access to the ballot and that they can be assured that their vote counts. If there are issues, we want to know about them, and we want to work to ensure that we can correct them in a timely manner.
And if you do have any concerns, we'll have a link on our website where you can file a complaint with the Department of Elections. Working for you at the state capitol, I'm Shannon Lilly, CBS 6 News.
Thanks, Shannon. Well, some voters ran into some issues today in Powhatan after several precincts ran out of ballots.
They now have to be counted by hand. Our Tracy Sears is live with that story. Tracy?
Yeah, Bill, it's been a very long night for Powhatan County voting officials who have been working throughout the night. They tell me they're probably going to be working into tomorrow trying to hand count all these ballots that are still at this hour coming in from precincts from all across the county. Now, Powhatan County was among a handful of smaller counties in Virginia reporting widespread ballot shortages. In fact, 9 voting precincts reported that they ran out of ballots during the day today, a true testament to voter turnout here in the county. As a result, all these ballots have to be hand counted during tabulation. I spoke with the county registrar's office this evening, and they tell me this process of hand counting the votes is very tedious. It could go through the evening and well into tomorrow, and we'll be sure to update you on Powhatan's efforts beginning tomorrow morning at 4:30 on CBS 6 Early Morning News. Reporting live in Powhatan County, Tracy Sears. Now back to you.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Well, all eyes are on the Commonwealth as the governor's race could have a national impact. Our in-depth coverage continues as our Capitol insider Joe St. George weighs in on how the results of the gubernatorial race could be felt in Washington.
Plus, CBS 6 political analyst Dr. Bob will join us again live in the studio to talk about what the results mean for the Commonwealth. Zach?
We had a cold and wet day today, but I do expect more sunshine tomorrow. I'll show you who's under the gun tonight, though, for a frost or a freeze when the News at 11 continues.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, mic check 1 2. Hey, mic check 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10.
With only 2 states electing a new governor today, and with Virginia seen as the only competitive race, it's not an exaggeration to say the eyes of the nation were fixed upon the gubernatorial contest.
And many wondering, is it a harbinger of things to come in 2022? For the national perspective, we're joined live by our Capitol insider, Joe St. George. Good evening, Joe.
Hey, Bill and Candace, to answer your question, yes, the country was watching Virginia. The country are focused on the results coming out of Virginia and also taking a peek at New Jersey. Oh, by the way, currently the Republican candidate up in the Garden State is leading there as well. Republicans are quick to say between the Virginia results, the New Jersey results that we're seeing right now, it is a mini red wave that's sweeping the country that could be, as you say, Bill, a harbinger of things to come come 2022. 1 year from tonight, election night 2022, the House and the Senate will be up for grabs. Democrats currently control them. Did tonight indicate that the country wants to move back into a conservative direction? What did we see in Virginia tonight with Glenn Younkin and these results? We saw a lot of anger in rural Virginia, and they voted in numbers greater than they voted for President Donald Trump 1 year ago. Rural parts of our country are voting more Republican. Meanwhile, suburban parts of Virginia shifted maybe not entirely away from the Democratic Party, but certainly closer to Republicans as well. Those are the major themes emerging. National Democrats are paying attention to tonight. National Republicans are as well. We'll see if anything changes in the coming days and weeks with their policies to try to fix things if you're a Democrat between now and election night 2022. Guys, I'll send it down I-95 to you in Richmond.
All right, a cloudy and cool day today with scattered showers around. Now the rain has moved out, but some fog is settling in. Let's see how we did for today. 48 this morning, 52 the high temperature, and really it's kind of flip-flop. The 52 occurred actually this morning, and then we fell in the afternoon. It was chilly this afternoon, even with a little bit of rainfall, less than 1/10 of an inch, enough to keep everything wet. Right now it's 47. That's the new low for the day. It actually feels like 45 because of a north wind at 5 miles per hour. Other temperatures out there, mostly in the 40s, but look at this. We've already started to drop into the 30s, already down to freezing up in the Stanton area. And we've seen some fog develop, and it's very intermittent. We'll go from perfect visibility of 10 miles down to a quarter-mile visibility. Quarter-mile visibility also in Farmville, so Farmville and Fredericksburg. And so it's very hit or miss. Be careful if you travel early in the morning to rapidly changing visibility. And you can see some of that fog settling in across the area. Skies clear out. Nothing going on back to the west. We've got a pretty nice day on the way for tomorrow, but it'll get off to a chilly start. All counties here in the purple, those are freeze warning counties. So if you haven't done it already, you need to bring in any tender vegetation or cover it up tonight. The areas in light blue around that, a frost advisory. Lows tonight, getting some 20